Chapter 1. All of you, this is your last awakening ceremony. If you still fail to awaken, prepare to live the rest of your life as an ordinary human and attend a normal university. You can also try to improve your cultivation in these last few months to increase your chances of entering an academy. The teacher's voice echoed across the room as several students stood before him, listening attentively, their expressions a mix of anxiety and hope. Among these students was Michael. Michael was not from this world. He had arrived in this body just 3 weeks ago, a body that coincidentally shared his name. Unlike his original world, in this one, everyone between the ages of 16 and 18 had a chance to awaken a class. More than 200 years ago, the apocalypse descended upon this world, bringing spatial rifts that spawned countless monsters and unleashed chaos. Fortunately, following the apocalypse, the world became digitized for a select few who would later be known as Awakeners. Thanks to these Awakeners, whose classes granted them incredible powers, the apocalypse ended after decades, and humanity finally reclaimed their land. When peace returned, as expected, Awakeners became figures of importance, and it became a dream for young people aged 16 to 18 to become one. However, becoming an Awakener was a privilege granted to only a few, and for this group of 18-year-old students, this was their last chance. Michael was nervous too. Though he had only been in this world for 3 weeks, he understood the significance of this ceremony. While it wasn't as though all hope would be lost if he failed to awaken, it was undeniable that no path held more promise than becoming an Awakener. Under the nervous gaze of nearly 100 students below the podium, the teacher picked up a file from the table in front of him and began to call out names. Lillian Stone. Why, yes, sir. The first student called was a young woman. Upon hearing her name, she immediately walked toward the podium, but perhaps due to her nervousness, she stumbled and fell. However, no one laughed or made fun of her. On any other occasion, they might have, but today, they weren't sure they would perform any better than the student who had fallen. The teacher, seemingly accustomed to such mishaps, waited patiently for her to get back on her feet and approach him. When she finally reached him, he wasted no time and gestured toward the transparent orb on the table. This is your 3rd time here, so you know what to do. Just place your hand on the awakening orb. If there's a reaction, it means you've successfully awakened. If there isn't, the teacher left his sentence unfinished, but it made the hearts of the students on the podium sink. Michael felt it too, though he handled it better than the others. Thanks to his mental age and the challenges he'd faced before he died from cancer in his previous life, he could keep his composure. Michael's eyes were drawn to the awakening orb on the table between the teacher and the female student. From what they had been taught in school, every Awakener, aside from gaining a class that granted them supernatural powers, also had the ability to connect their consciousness to another world, a world filled with treasures, and could quickly enhance their prowess. It was said that this world really resembled a game, though, in many ways, it was not. The awakening orb itself originated from that mysterious world. Just as the teacher had said, the girl didn't require any assistance. With a familiarity that made the corner of Michael's eyes twitch slightly, she placed both hands on the awakening orb and waited. A few seconds passed, and just as the teacher was preparing to dismiss the disappointed girl, who looked like she might burst into tears at any moment, a white light suddenly shone from the orb. Following that, a manifestation in the form of twin swords appeared on her back before disappearing. Lillian Stone has successfully awakened a class, martial artist, the teacher announced, his voice filled with surprise, and his previously expressionless face showing clear astonishment. For this group of 18-year-olds, he hadn't expected any of them to awaken, but to think that the very first student called up would do so filled him with considerable surprise. It was well known that the best age to awaken a class was 16, as that was when the chances were highest. The older one got, the less likely awakening became. When the students heard the teacher's announcement, the previously quiet hall erupted with noise. Wow, Lillian actually awakened? First come, first served? Damn. TSK, to think the 4th to the last dumbest person in all of Class 3 would awaken. You do know that awakening successfully doesn't necessarily have anything to do with intelligence, right? Shut up. Of course I know. Can't I just be bitter for a minute? What happened to my freedom to be negative? Like his fellow classmates, Michael was pleasantly surprised that the first student to step onto the podium had awakened. It was common knowledge that their group had almost no hope of awakening. So seeing someone succeed lifted everyone's spirits and filled them with a renewed sense of hope. However, that newly lit hope was quickly shattered. Mia Keem, awakening failed. Bruce Lean, awakening failed. Then the fourth, the fifth, all the way up to the 48th. Every student who stepped up to the podium failed to awaken, except for the first female student. Sir, the novel_fired at website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. The entire hall felt as silent as a graveyard, save for the quiet sobs of those who had failed their awakening. Chapter 2. Michael tried his best to ignore the cries of his fellow classmates around him. Failing to awaken in this world was not like failing a college exam on Earth. In the latter case, you could keep trying, and many alternatives weren't considered worse than attending college. But here, failing to awaken had no equivalent alternative. It was like a poor man, burdened with the responsibility of caring for his two chronically ill parents while also supporting a younger sibling through school, betting on 3 different games with a chance to win $1 million each, and losing everything. In such a situation, breaking down and crying wouldn't be unusual. The scene around Michael now was eerily similar. Most of the students at Woodstone Public School No. 3 came from families living near or below the poverty line. For them, successfully awakening was like having $100 million land in their lap. But for these sobbing students, that distant hope of drastically changing their lives had slipped through their fingers 3 times in a row. Sir, the novelfire.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. It was no wonder that some of them broke down in tears immediately. Michael tried not to let the dark atmosphere surrounding him affect his mindset and attempted to stay positive. His situation wasn't any better than those around him, if not worse. In this world, the original owner of this body was an orphan living with his aunt, a widow with a child of her own to care for. Together, the family of 3 barely survived on the limited funds his aunt managed to earn. For Michael, successfully awakening was the fastest way to change his family's fate, but his chance of awakening was less than 1%. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of bitterness. Though he was grateful for the chance to live again, especially in a healthy body, it would be painful to live a life of mediocrity. Yet, there was nothing he could do about his slim chance of awakening. All he could do was hope for the best. Michael continued to watch as more students stepped up to the podium, only to fail in their attempts to awaken. There were only a total of 86 students in the hall, so Michael's turn was approaching quickly. Since the teacher hadn't assigned a cue and called names at random, Michael could only wait for his turn. Just when the teacher in charge of the awakenings thought that this batch of students would only produce 1 awakener, the awakening orb in front of him suddenly emitted light. The cause of the reaction was a male student standing before him. Just like the female student who had first awakened, a manifestation appeared, standard for new awakeners. The male student's body glowed red, and a staff made of fire appeared in his hands before promptly disappearing. Brian Lien has successfully awakened a class, Fire Mage, the teacher announced. As with the first awakening, an uproar erupted in the hall, but this time it was even more intense. Damn, Brian actually awakened. The heavens really aren't fair. I know, right? He's already one of the few students who managed to ignite their life seeds before the college exams. Something rare even in big cities. And now he's lucky enough to awaken too. That's not all. His night-breathing technique happens to align with the fire attribute, and now that he's awakened as a fire mage, the two will complement each other perfectly. FCK. Like his classmates, Michael also had an impression of Brian. At Woodstone Public High School No. 3, Brian Lien was one of the few outstanding students who could hold his own against those from private schools with better resources, despite his humble background. His reputation extended beyond the school. He was even somewhat known throughout Woodstone City. This fame wasn't because of his academic achievements, but rather due to his exceptional talent in cultivation. The awakening orb wasn't the only piece of technology that awakeners had brought back from the mysterious realm known as the Land of Origins. They introduced other technologies that significantly boosted the real world's advancement. The Land of Origins wasn't exclusive to humans. Many other civilizations of various races existed there. In fact, Humans here could be considered newcomers to that world. These civilizations had already used the land of origins to significantly advance their own societies. Using their methods, awakeners managed to bring something back to this world: cultivation. Cultivation offered a method for ordinary people to gain supernatural powers. Although they couldn't progress as quickly as awakeners, be as powerful as them, or enter the land of origins. Brian practiced the breathing technique of the night cultivation system and had considerable talent in cultivation, so even if he failed to awaken, he still had a bright future. Just as awakeners were respected and needed in this world, cultivators were too. One was just way too at the top to be compared to anything, but the need of the two were equal. Well, according to what has been told to Michael, the world changed when the apocalypse descended. It was no longer just a planet, but a realm. Planet Aurora became the Aurora realm. Some of the cracks that brought monsters into the world remained, with new ones occasionally appearing. Some were filled with monsters, while others served as passages to other realms. Awakeners were few in number, so cultivators were needed to handle these realms. Awakeners advanced society, while cultivators kept it safe. This was something that had been taught to Michael and other children from a young age. Becoming an awakener was more desirable, though. Cultivating required resources, and they weren't cheap, with costs only increasing as one progressed. This alone had already cut off more than half of the population's ability to walk on this path. Generally, only the talented or the wealthy had a significant chance of achieving great success in cultivation. The teacher, who hadn't even smiled much when Lillian Stone awakened, now had a wide grin as he addressed Brian. "Come stand here and wait," he said, pointing to the spot beside him where Lillian Stone also stood. He was thrilled that a genius from the school had just become even more exceptional. A super genius. After settling that, the teacher continued with the awakening ceremony, but he was met with disappointment as no other student managed to awaken, not even those with talent in cultivation. This wasn't unexpected. Just because a student had talent in cultivation didn't mean they would awaken a class, especially not at the age of 18. However, the teacher remained quite pleased, as the school now had 2 more awakeners to its name. The awakening ceremony continued, and soon it was time for the 80th student to step up to the podium: Michael. Michael Norman. "Yes, sir." Hearing his name called, Michael nervously made his way up to the podium. Since the previous owner of this body didn't have much presence at school, he didn't have anyone cheering for him. Soon, Michael reached the podium, and under the teacher's guidance, he placed his hands, now unknowingly sweating, on the awakening orb, filled with anticipation. Chapter 3. Seconds ticked by, and Michael could almost hear his own heartbeat pounding in his chest. Each student was allocated 30 seconds with the awakening orb. Any more time was pointless, as it had been proven over the years. 10 seconds passed. 15 seconds. 20 seconds. 25 seconds. Just as the teacher prepared to dismiss Michael, whose heart had already sunk into bitterness, the awakening orb under Michael's hands suddenly emitted a bright light. Instantly, Michael felt a warm sensation coursing through his body. His mind seemed to clear, and a surge of strength flowed through him. The manifestation that accompanied every new awakener soon appeared. A black, gloomy energy swirled around Michael, coating his body, while a dark staff briefly materialized in his hand before everything vanished. Michael was momentarily stunned by the sudden turn of events, but the voice of the equally surprised teacher brought him back to reality. "Michael Norman has successfully awakened a class, Necromancer," the teacher announced. "Another one. Necromancer, huh? That sounds powerful and maybe a little bit evil. Be more confident in your speech, brother. It's evil as fuck. Yeah, but as long as I can awaken a class, I wouldn't even mind if it involved selling my body. Just say you're horny, bro." As before, an uproar erupted in the hall, but it was more subdued than the previous 2 times. It couldn't be helped. Unlike the excitement over Lillian Stone's unexpected awakening or the amazement at Brian Lian's transformation into a super genius, Michael didn't have much of a presence in the school. But that wasn't the case anymore. Also, only a few of his classmates from Class 3, Section N8, were in the hall, and he recognized even fewer of them. He didn't personally know any of them. Good, good, good," the teacher in charge of the ceremony said. repeating the word 3 times in delight. It wasn't that he knew Michael personally, but rather because a ceremony he had expected to yield no awakeners had surprisingly produced 3. If none had awakened, he wouldn't have been surprised. Such outcomes were common. Come stand beside me and wait. The teacher gestured for Michael to join the other 2 awakeners. Yes, teacher. Michael nodded, still in a daze, and compiled. Seeing a new comrade, Lillian and Brian both gave him a nod of acknowledgement, which Michael returned. In truth, Michael's attention was no longer fully on his surroundings. He could catch bits of what his classmates whispered about him, but he was too preoccupied to care. His attention was on what had just appeared before his eyes. A blue, transparent panel floated in front of Michael. Name: Michael Norman. Race: human. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 1. EXP: 0/100. Strength: 1.3. Agility: 1.4. Constitution: 1.2. Intelligence: 4.5. Attribute points: 0. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class skill: Contract slot 0 halves. Gift: Mark of Origin. Michael's mind wasn't focused on the details displayed on the panel. It was only now that he fully grasped what had just happened. He had awakened. He had really awakened. A surge of happiness rushed through him, and his tense shoulders finally relaxed. While this was only the beginning, the most important thing was that he had awakened. No matter what came next, his future now held new possibilities. Michael let out a deep sigh of relief and turned his attention back to the rest of the awakening ceremony. Only 6 students remained, and in about 4 minutes, the ceremony would conclude. Each student would soon return home, left to ponder their future based on the outcome of their awakening. Now that he no longer felt nervous, Michael's mind was free to think of other things. cthnovelfire.nut website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. The most important realization was that he had awakened a class, the Necromancer class. In truth, Michael knew little about awakeners and their classes beyond what he had learned in school and from hearsay. What he did know was that classes were generally categorized into 3 types: combat, support, and lifestyle. His Necromancer class seemed like a mix of both combat and support, but Michael wasn't entirely sure. Aside from the knight and mage classes that were so influential in this world, he knew little about other classes. The school only taught general knowledge about awakeners, without going into much depth. Perhaps the higher-ups felt that students who were unlikely to awaken didn't need to know more and could better use their time studying or cultivating. It's also said that if one cultivated before awakening and had talent in it, they could activate a secondary class, so cultivation was seen as a good thing overall. Michael wasn't sure if limited information was unique to Woodstone Public High School No. 3, but he did know one thing for certain. There was no discrimination between classes. There was no such thing as an overly weak class, as all classes theoretically had no limits. Power depended on the awakeners themselves. According to the teachers, this even applied to lifestyle classes like tailors. Michael wasn't sure how true this was, but he figured he'd find out soon enough. After all, he was now an awakener, someone who should be valued by the government. Just as Michael sorted out his thoughts and was about to check the panel that had appeared in his mind earlier, the voice of the teacher in charge of the awakening ceremony caught his attention. Okay, that's it for today. For those of you who failed to awaken, remember that failing to become an awakener doesn't mean your futures are bleak. During the early days of the apocalypse, at least half of our ancestors who played a crucial role in our survival and advancement were ordinary people. So what if you didn't awaken? The sad students below the podium heard this, and a wave of motivation surged through them. Even Michael couldn't help but be impressed by the teacher's words. However, he knew that once they left the hall, the harsh reality would soon catch up to them. Perhaps some of the students already understood this, but they needed something to make them feel better at the moment. One must know that while this world was technically more advanced than Michael's previous one, it wasn't all sunshine for the average person. For example, bankers had long become a thing of the past, along with many other jobs. Only a few establishments still employed people for tasks that machines could do, either because they were too poor or wanted to be classy, like some upscale hotels. Most people in this world live in poverty, barely scraping by with the few jobs available to them. It was only after arriving in this world that Michael truly understood a saying from his old life. Technology can be both a blessing and a curse. This desperation to escape their current circumstances was one of the reasons why these students so desperately wanted to become awakeners. If Michael hadn't awakened, he would have been on the receiving end of the teacher's encouragement too. He knew he was truly lucky. Seeing that his words had resonated with the students, the teacher nodded slightly in satisfaction before speaking again. The college exams for both regular colleges and cultivation academies are in 3 months, so make sure to prepare seriously during this time. Just because you don't need to come to school again after today doesn't mean you should slack off, okay? Yes, sir. The students, including Michael and the 2 other new awakeners, responded loudly. All right, you're dismissed. As the students made their way out of the hall, the teacher turned to Michael, Lillian, and Brian. With a smile, he said, "You 3, follow me to the principal's office." Chapter 4. The moment the teacher in charge of the awakening ceremony left the hall with Michael and the 2 other new awakeners, they encountered 2 teachers, a male and a female, on their way to the principal's office. Following the male teacher was a young girl, who seemed to be around 17 or 18 years old. Behind the female teacher were 5 younger-looking students, 2 boys and 3 girls. From the brief conversation between the 3 teachers, Michael learned that the students accompanying them had successfully awakened as well. The girl following the male teacher was also from Class 3, though Michael didn't recognize her. That wasn't surprising. After all, Woodstone was a public school with over 600 students in Class 3 alone. There were 9 sections in Class 3, each with up to 100 students max per teacher. Although the classes rarely reached full capacity, since that would make even the large classrooms feel cramped, there were usually no fewer than 60 students per class. As for the 5 students behind the female teacher, they were from Class 1. Michael had guessed this due to their younger appearance, but he was still shocked by the number of awakeners in that class. In fact, he was surprised by how many students had successfully awakened this year in general. Including the students from Class 3, a total of 9 students had awakened. While this might seem small compared to Woodstone's overall student population, it was actually significant. Even Class 1, which consisted of 16-year-olds, the age group most likely to awaken, rarely had this many, 4 awakeners in a single year. In all the years Michael had been in senior high, the total number of students who had successfully awakened, from his time in Class 1 through Class 3, including the older students, barely exceeded 12. And most of those awakeners had been from Class 1. This year, not a single student from Class 2, where most students were 17 years old, had awakened. Therefore, the number of awakeners at Woodstone Public High School this year was unusually high, and Class 3's success, in particular, was downright abnormal for reasons unknown. As Michael mused over his thoughts, they soon reached the principal's office. Upon reaching the door, the only female teacher among them took the initiative to knock. "Principal," she called out. "Come in." A voice responded from within the office. With permission granted, the female teacher took the lead and entered the room. Inside, a middle-aged man sat behind a desk. Michael recognized him. He was the principal of Woodstone Public High School No. 3, Mike Bill. It was rumored that he was a powerful knight, though Michael wasn't sure, as he had never seen the man in action. Setting aside the document he had been focused on, Principal Mike turned to smile at the newcomers. 9 awakeners this year. Heavens must really favor our school, the principal remarked, pleasantly surprised by the number of students in his office. It was customary for new awakeners to meet with the principal alongside their teachers, so he was confident he hadn't made a mistake. Seeing no one contradict his statement, he knew his assumption was correct. With this confirmation, the smile on Principal Mike's face grew even brighter. "I believe your teachers have already informed you why you're here, yes?" Principal Mike asked, glancing at Michael and the other students in his office. "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. "Haha, there's no need to be nervous. What I'm about to tell you is probably something you already know, but I'll still say it," the principal said with a light chuckle. Michael and the other students subconsciously straightened their backs. The principal paid no mind to this and continued. "As you know, as awakeners, your life and future are now different from those of ordinary people. Power and wealth are within your grasp, if you're wise enough to seize them. If you had failed to awaken, You would be preparing to enter an ordinary university to further your education. If you had decent talent in cultivation, you'd try to enter a cultivation academy. But you all have successfully awakened. So instead of attending a cultivation academy or an ordinary university, you'll be going to an awakened university where you'll learn everything you need to know about being an awakener. You might think that going to an academy is unnecessary since you could just enter the land of origin on your own, like our ancestors, and make things work. While that's possible, anyone with good sense wouldn't do that. Why make things harder for yourself? So, right now, aside from entering the land of origin, which you'll soon have access to, getting into an Awakener Academy should be your next main focus. As for learning more about your new identity as an Awakener, you'll need to visit the Supers Association to register after this. The association will provide you with better information that you currently need. The principal then went on to mention a few other points. Some of these, Michael and the others already knew, while others provided new insights. SEO Arch the Oval Fired at website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. After saying what he needed to, Principal Mike dismissed the students and teachers, asking Brian to stay behind. After being dismissed from the principal's office, the teacher responsible for overseeing Michael's awakening spoke up. As new awakeners, you must register with the Supers Association within 3 days. Failing to do so is considered a crime. Though you have some time, I recommend you register immediately if you're free today. As the principal mentioned, you also need to take the upcoming college exams seriously. Just because you're awakeners doesn't exempt you from academic testing. While it may not be as strict as for regular university students due to your status, it's still important depending on the academy you plan to attend. Anyway, the Supers Association will have more details on this, so make sure you register quickly. For those who aren't in their third year, the teacher addressed the students from Class 1. You can also attempt the college exams if you think you're up for it, as the Federation and most academies do not oppose it. However, most awakeners who manage to awaken before their third year prefer to take home lessons while honing their skills as awakeners, aiming for a higher score when they're ready to enter the academy. After offering this advice, and with 2 other teachers sharing their own, they left the 9 students and returned to the teacher's office. There was no need to flatter the new awakeners. These were no longer the apocalyptic days. Although the teachers were softer with them compared to before, it wasn't to the point of bowing at their feet, but they certainly didn't want to offend them either. With the rise of cultivation, awakeners were no longer the only powerful people in the world. Ordinary individuals could reach similar levels of strength, though awakeners were a rarer breed. Veteran teachers like these knew that leaving a good impression was enough, as they had no hidden agendas. Chapter 5. The students felt a little lost after the teachers left, but not Michael. He already knew what he needed to do next. The most important task was to register at the Supers Association, and the second was to inform his aunt about his awakening. Michael was already familiar with the Supers Association. Even before he transmigrated into this world, the original owner of his body had a basic understanding of it. This was common knowledge among the natives. The Supers Association was an organization under the Federation, the new government established after the apocalypse. The world now had only one ruling authority, the Federation, under which were countries, states, and cities. The Supers Association managed all supernatural beings in the Aurora realm. Ordinary humans had to be a rank 1 cultivator before they could register, whereas awakeners were required to register immediately upon awakening, as they became supernatural beings the moment they awakened. The purpose of the Supers Association was to protect the general public, manage supernatural beings, and provide them with various benefits. Michael made his way out of the school compound. As soon as he stepped outside, he hailed an empty taxi that happened to be passing by. "To the Supers Association," he said. "That'll be $1, the driver replied. "Okay." The Supers Association was a little far from Woodstone Public School. On foot, it would take Michael about 35 minutes, but by taxi, it would take no more than 20. Settling into the passenger seat, Michael pulled his phone from his pocket. Normally, if the school were still in session, it would have been in his backpack, but with the college exams approaching and no real need to attend classes, everything aside from his school uniform was casual today. Every senior high student who came to school today did so primarily for the awakening ceremony. After today, the school would feel noticeably emptier. Though the technology in this world was more advanced than Earth's, familiar technologies still existed. The rich used floating cars, while the less well-off relied on vehicles with wheels. The wealthy had watches that projected holographic displays as substitutes for phones, while others were content with traditional phones. The world was a mix of old and new technology, but somehow it all blended into a strange, yet harmonious system that didn't seem out of place. Michael decided to text his aunt instead of calling her. She worked as a cook at a relatively upscale restaurant, so she was likely still busy. Michael sent a short message saying he had succeeded in his awakening. Just as he was about to put his phone aside, an incoming call flashed on the screen. It was his aunt. Michael immediately answered the call. "Aunt, aren't you at work?" Michael immediately inquired. It was rare for his aunt to answer so quickly, even on her days off. "I'm still at work. I just happened to be on a short break when your message came in," his aunt, Aunt Mia, replied. Michael believed her, as he could hear the noise in the background. "Mike," his aunt called out, her tone hesitant as if she wanted to say something but was unsure. "Ma." Michael smiled, already guessing what was on her mind. He understood her disbelief. Most parents were shocked when their children awakened on their first try, let alone Michael, who had even less of a chance. "Your message," Aunt Mia began slowly, pausing before continuing. "Is it true?" "It is, Aunt Mia. Today's my lucky day, haha." Michael chuckled in response. Aunt Mia let out a small squeak of joy, clearly trying to contain her excitement. Knowing she was still at work, Michael decided to end the conversation so she could get back to her duties. "I'm on my way to the Supers Association, Aunt. I'll talk to you when you get home." Okay. I'll transfer some money to you now. Get yourself something to eat, and save a little for Lily when she gets back from school. I might be home a little late today." "Yes, Aunt." After exchanging a few more words, they ended the call. Michael let out a sigh as happiness surged through him. Though he was originally from Earth, he had fully embraced his role as Michael in this world and cared deeply for his family here. Perhaps it had something to do with losing his parents early in life back on Earth. In a way, both Michaels had experienced particularly difficult childhoods. After ending the call, Michael closed his eyes to rest, ignoring the driver's gaze, who seemed like he had something to ask. Only now did he realize how tense he had been in the awakening hall, leaving his spirit weary. It had only been a few minutes since Michael decided to rest when he felt a nudge from the driver. "We're here," the driver said. Michael weakly opened his eyes, still a bit dazed, but when he saw the two-story building not far from him, his mind cleared, and he quickly sat up. "Your code, please," Michael requested. "Here." The driver compiled, showing Michael a code on his phone, which Michael then scanned with his own phone, transferring the fare to the driver's account. "Thanks for the ride," Michael said. "No problem. Congratulations on your awakening, by the way." Watching the driver drive away and hearing his last words, a smile appeared on Michael's face. If the driver wasn't certain when he overheard the conversation with Michael's aunt earlier, he would be now, having seen how focused Michael was on the Supers Association branch as he got out of the car. Michael shook his head and refocused. Taking a deep breath, he made his way toward the entrance of the Supers Association. Chapter 6. The inside of the Supers Association branch was a bit noisy, which surprised Michael greatly. Outside, he hadn't heard much sound, so he expected the building to be quiet, but it wasn't. There were actually quite a lot of people, most of them appearing very young. Michael didn't need to think much to realize that these people were probably new awakeners, just like him. With only 2 Supers Association branches in Woodstone City, it wasn't surprising to see many awakeners despite their rarity. Since all schools nationwide had chosen today for the awakening ceremony this year, most of the young people in the Supers Association building were likely the new awakeners from Woodstone City. After today, the number of new awakeners registering over the next 2 days should be low. Michael glanced around, and a rough count suggested there were at least 30 students present. This was quite a number, considering they all came from the 9 public and private schools in Woodstone City. As he took in his surroundings, Michael lined up behind one of the shorter queues leading to the reception table. He wasn't sure what to expect when he reached the front, but seeing others his age, likely fellow new awakeners, gave him some idea. Fortunately, Michael didn't have to wait long. 28 minutes later, he was near the front, with only one person ahead of him. Behind him, more people had joined the line. As Michael waited, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a new message. $300 has been transferred to your account 2778 XXXX Bank International from Mia Grace. Your current account balance is $461. $300? That's quite a lot. Michael felt a little uncomfortable seeing how much his aunt had sent. Aunt Mia's monthly salary was only about $3,000, excluding occasional bonuses, and she had just transferred a tenth of it. Considering it was mid-June and Mia's salary typically arrived at the beginning of the month, this $300 could very well be a quarter of what she had left. Even back on Earth, $3,000 wasn't much for a family to live on. The $161 balance he had before was what remained from the $300 monthly allowance Aunt Mia gave him. Though Michael was concerned, he couldn't help but feel a warm sensation in his chest. He was truly loved in this world, something he had rarely felt back on Earth, where he had even faced his battle with cancer alone, with no one to care for him. As he thought of his family, Michael secretly clenched his fist, silently vowing once again to change their lives and take care of them. However, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. SEO Arch, the NOVL fired an E.T. website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Is becoming an awakener truly life-changing for the average person? To be honest, everyone had been raised to believe that becoming an awakener was a one-way ticket to the top. But beyond the power it brought, the exact reasons and ways it transformed a life remained a mystery to most. It was common knowledge that power brought wealth, though. Michael, who had barely lived his adult years, was well aware of this. As various thoughts flashed through his mind, it was soon Michael's turn at the reception table. "Good day, sir. What can I do for you?" the lady behind the counter asked. She seemed to be in her late 20s and wore a professional smile. Her calm demeanor eased Michael's troubled mind a little, allowing him to reply calmly. "I'm here to register." As the lady inquired, glancing down at his school uniform. Usually, there were only two types of students who came to register: new awakeners or those talented enough to reach rank 1 as cultivators while still in school. Today was the National Awakening Ceremony Day, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. "Yes, I'm here to register as an awakener," Michael confirmed. "Oh, I see," the lady replied, not appearing surprised by his response. After confirming his purpose, she began asking Michael a few questions. Most were about his personal details, like his name, age, and address. She even asked for his bank account number for some reason, which Michael provided without hesitation. Thankfully, the process was quick and surprisingly straightforward. "Aren't you going to ask about my class?" Michael asked, curious. "There's no need for that, Mr. Michael. Your school will provide that information to us," the lady replied in her signature smile. "Ah, I see," Michael said, understanding now. "I thought she might have forgotten to ask, but it makes sense. Even if the Supers Association had a way to verify one's class, doing it for every new registrant would take too much time." After pressing his fingerprint on a tool the lady provided and signing his name on a freshly printed document, she addressed him again, this time in a more formal tone. "Congratulations on your awakening, Mr. Michael. As of today, you are now a proud warrior of the Federation, the people, and the Aurora realm. As a new awakener of the Federation, a set of military cultivation techniques and martial techniques will be sent to your email. A link to a specially designed platform for supernaturals will also be provided. The password is your full name written in all caps, followed by this year's number, 228, with no spaces in between. Also, as a new awakener, you are eligible for a monthly payment of $15,000. This amount will be reduced by half if you fail to reach rank 1 within 6 months, and will be revoked if you fail to become a rank 2 awakener within a year. Of course, the monthly payment will also increase alongside your advancement. Michael was a little overwhelmed by the sudden information dump, but one thing immediately caught his attention: money. It wasn't just the money. Other benefits came with it too. Though the conditions seemed strict, it didn't change the fact that he was soon going to have a significant income. Michael's heart quickened a little, but before he could sink deeper into his thoughts, the lady behind the counter spoke again. "Is there anything else you'd like to ask about, Mr. Michael?" He was about to reflexively say no, since he had grasped most of what she said when he remembered something. Feeling suddenly bashful, with a red face, he inquired in a low tone, "When will the monthly benefit arrive, miss?" Ah. The lady was visibly taken aback, but after regaining her composure, her smile grew even brighter, and it seemed she was struggling to hold back a laugh. Her reaction made Michael feel even more embarrassed, but thankfully, she didn't dwell on it. "It should arrive within an hour at most, sir," she replied. Michael nodded slightly, thanking the woman behind the counter before quickly making his way out of the Supers Association building. Though he didn't regret asking about the money, he couldn't help but feel a little self-conscious, worried it might have come across as if he cared more about the money than anything else. Though, in truth, he kind of did. Anyway, with this, the house shouldn't be low on funds in a few months. Aunt won't have to work so hard anymore, and she and Lily can take better care of themselves now. Michael was filled with joy, but he didn't let his happiness blind him. He knew nothing came free in this world. Even as an awakener, the Federation wouldn't just hand out money without expecting something in return. Though it seems complicated, according to that lady, all I have to do to retain the benefits, and even improve them, is to get stronger. Michael had a clear goal now, to increase his strength quickly and make life better for himself and his family. Successfully awakening was just the beginning. But before anything else, he needed to get home and study more about awakeners once the Supers Association sent him the information. Chapter 7. The journey back home required Michael to take another taxi, which he didn't hesitate to pay for. Though he felt his body had gotten stronger since his awakening, it didn't mean he had to push himself unnecessarily. His home was nowhere close to the Supers Association. From his school to his house was a 30-minute walk, and with the Supers Association's location added in, it would take him at least an hour and a half to get home. Now that he had money in his account and was soon going to receive much more, Michael didn't see any reason to be frugal. While in the taxi, he sent his aunt a message letting her know he was done registering at the Supers Association and was on his way home. It was also around this time that a bank notification arrived, informing him that $15,000 had been transferred to his account. I'm rich. Sir, the Oval fired at website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Though Michael had seen larger sums in his previous life, it was easy to forget that he was currently playing the role of an 18-year-old, something he had fully embraced. Unlike earlier, when Aunt Mia had responded immediately, there was no quick reply this time, which didn't surprise Michael. He had considered sending Aunt Mia a portion of the money he received, but knowing her, she would probably panic and it might affect her work. Since there was no need to rush, he decided to wait until she got back home. Michael didn't have the taxi drop him directly at his house, but rather at a mall near the community where his house was located. He hadn't forgotten his aunt's request to buy something for himself and his cousin, though he decided to use the money he received from the government instead of the amount she had given him. When his aunt returned later in the evening, he planned to return her money, along with extra. By the time Michael left the mall, he was carrying several bags. This round of shopping had cost him about $500. It might seem excessive to spend money like this, but Michael didn't regret it. For now, it was time for his family to enjoy life a little more. After all, what was the point of having money if not to spend it on oneself and loved ones? Of course, Michael had a limit to how much he would spend. He didn't know much yet, but he suspected that the government didn't provide benefits to new awakeners purely out of goodwill. He had a feeling that part of the money was meant to be a resource for growth. There's no need to overthink it. I'll understand better once I check the emails from the Supers Association. By the time Michael finally got home, the sun had already set. The awakening ceremony had been held at 12:30 in the afternoon, and now it was a little past 4 p.m. Lily will be back from school soon. Let me use this time to get things in order. And Michael did just that. He put the food products in their respective places and organized the rest of his purchases accordingly. I'm so tired. By the time Michael was done, he was famished. He had only had a light breakfast that morning, so he decided to cook something for himself using some of the ingredients he had bought from the mall. Meat was on the menu too. Thanks to living with an aunt who was a chef, Michael's cooking skills weren't bad at all. He made rice and fried meat, and just as he finished, his cousin, Lily, arrived home. Lily, like her mom, had black hair, blue eyes, and a short stature. Michael, on the other hand, stood out in their family with his blonde hair, green eyes, and tall build. It wasn't surprising to the family of three, as they knew he wasn't an immediate relative, but it often puzzled outsiders who assumed they were directly related, at least until they heard their different surnames. "Good evening, Brother Michael," Lily greeted as she poked her head through the kitchen door. "What are you cooking? Is that meat? It smells so good." Watching his cousin drool, Michael smiled helplessly. "Go wash up first before you think of eating. I'll serve you a plate in the meantime." "Okay, Brother Michael." The foodie immediately turned to leave without saying anything else. However, she came back a few seconds later and stared at Michael hesitantly. "What happened?" Michael asked, confused. "Brother Michael," Lily began, her hands behind her back and her head lowered. "How was the awakening ceremony?" "Oh, so that's what this is about." Michael sighed at how similar the mother-daughter duo was. They didn't want to hurt his feelings, yet they didn't pretend to ignore them. Lily heard Michael sigh and thought it was because he had failed to awaken. "Don't be too sad, Brother Michael. Even if you fail to awaken, it's not like the world has ended. I believe you can also become a powerful cultivator and enter those mysterious realms, even if you can't access the land of origin. The future is still bright." Michael was speechless when he heard this. When did I say I failed to awaken? What's going on in this 15-year-old's mind? However, soon Michael burst into laughter, clearly amused. Lily was stunned when she saw Michael laugh until tears formed in his eyes. She wondered if he had gone mad from sadness. Maybe that explained why he had been so unusually calm earlier. Michael couldn't bear to see the increasingly worried look on his cousin's face, so he addressed her. "Who said I failed to awaken, silly? Why do you think we're having meat if there wasn't a special occasion?" "Huh." Michael then gave her a brief summary of the events that happened that afternoon. He didn't go into much detail about the Supers Association, but did mention the money. "Wow. Brother Michael, you're rich. What are you thinking? Stop looking at me like that." "Brother Michael. Hey. Give me some money." Michael spent some time getting his sister's focus off his account balance with a few promises. Watching her hum and skip away in happiness, a gentle smile appeared on his face. Though it seemed like she was more excited about the money, he knew she was genuinely happy about his successful awakening. Michael took a deep breath and steeled himself before carrying a plate of food to his room. He had delayed for long enough. It was time to finally learn more about this awakening business. Chapter 8. Michael's family lived in a rented 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a 6-story building, with 4 apartments on each floor. The living conditions and environment could be described as passable. Michael figured that once he had more money in the future, he would move his family to a better place. The young man was filled with dreams and plans for the future. Among the 2 bedrooms, one belonged to Michael, while the other was shared by his cousin and aunt. Michael always felt guilty about this arrangement, and this feeling carried over after his transmigration. Regardless of whatever ties they shared, it didn't change the fact that he wasn't their immediate family member. But perhaps it was like a saying he had heard on Earth: family isn't decided by blood. After entering his relatively empty room, Michael sat on a chair next to a desk filled with books and placed his plate on the table. Taking a mouthful of rice with his spoon, he brought out his phone and opened his email. There, he found several messages from the Supers Association. The first message he saw was a congratulatory note on his awakening, with a file containing the set of military standard cultivation techniques that the lady at the counter had mentioned. The file contained a breathing technique that had no specific attribute and a meditative technique that was purely aimed at increasing his mana pool, also without any elemental attribute. Michael knew what breathing and meditative techniques were. After all, he had also practiced the free breathing technique provided by the Federation to its citizens, though he had no noticeable talent for cultivation. However, this was where his confusion began. Though Michael had not yet taken the time to study the panel in his mind, he knew he wasn't mistaken when he saw a level-up system there. One piece of information he knew about Awakeners was that they could level up in the land of origin. This was why Awakeners grew stronger more quickly, and the land of origin was often said to resemble a game. So this begged the question, since he could level up, why bother cultivating? Though there were rumors that cultivation could grant someone a second class, none of the teachers in school dared to confirm it. SEO arched the avruelfire.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Thankfully, there was a note in the file that soon cleared up Michael's confusion. So that's what it is. After reading the note in the file, Michael realized that just because awakeners could level up, which in turn made them stronger, didn't mean that cultivating was useless to them. What happens when one can't level up in the short term and still wants to grow stronger? Cultivation could help fill that gap. It turned out that, aside from leveling up, awakeners could actively enhance their strength through other means. The two techniques sent by the Supers Association belonged to the Knight Cultivation System and the Mage Cultivation System, respectively. Michael was more familiar with the former than the latter. It was said that the cultivation systems and methods originated from the land of origin. For the Knight Cultivation System, one had to push their human body to its theoretical limit and light up a life seed within them to step onto the path of the supernatural, but this was no easy task. The theoretical limit of a human body was twice the strength and capabilities of an average human. Even good athletes were typically only about half as strong as this threshold. To become a rank 1 knight, a person needed to push their body to twice the capabilities of an average human. This was very difficult to achieve under normal circumstances, but with a breathing technique, one could use it as a catalyst to reach their human limit. After lighting up a life seed, they would gain a new upper limit and could continue to polish their life seed, thereby continually increasing their body's limits and becoming stronger. This method was primarily for ordinary humans, but awakeners could also use breathing techniques to enhance their physical strength. The difference, however, was that they couldn't light up a life seed since, as awakeners, they no longer had limits. However, the note in the file revealed something that surprised Michael: the existence of dual classes. According to the note, if one could light up a life seed before they awakened, as long as there was no conflict with the class they eventually awakened into, and it wasn't the same, there was a high chance of acquiring a secondary class. This potential applied specifically to the Knight Cultivation System, which could awaken a secondary class, the Knight class. Michael didn't know much about the Mage system, and the note didn't elaborate on it. No wonder the principal and teachers kept mentioning that after registering with the Supers Association, we'd eventually learn what we needed to know. And this isn't even the only email I received. There's still that mysterious supernatural platform. Michael suddenly felt enlightened. Things that had been unclear to him before now made much more sense. The note that came with the techniques was really helpful. Unfortunately, he hadn't managed to become a knight before awakening, so he missed out on the chance for a dual class. Is this why the principal specifically told Brian to stay back? I don't know much about dual classes, but if one class can make someone stronger, it makes sense that having two would be even better. If that's the case, then Brian is indeed special, even among awakeners. Michael didn't feel envious of this, though. He wasn't in competition with anyone. He was already happy just to have been fortunate enough to awaken. Michael continued to read through the note, and once he finished, he closed it. There was no need to rush into cultivation. He still had something else to do. Feeling excited, Michael turned to the other email sent by the Supers Association. This email contained a link, which, according to the lady who attended to him at the Supers Association, was his access to a platform made for all registered supernatural beings within the Federation. Without hesitation, Michael tapped the link, which led him to a browser page with a simple design. Chapter 9. The page was simple, with a white background, the Supers Association's logo, and 2 empty bars for inputting an email and password. There wasn't anything particularly interesting to observe on this page, so Michael quickly entered his email and password according to the instructions given by the lady at the Supers Association. He felt a sense of anticipation. After all, this was a platform exclusively for supernatural beings, something he never could have imagined accessing in both his lives. Somehow, it feels like I've been invited into a secret organization. After inputting his details, Michael signed in. Soon, he was taken to a new page. Unlike the somewhat bland appearance of the login page, this one was more vibrant and lively. It looked like a forum. A lot seemed to be happening, but unfortunately, there wasn't any instruction manual. Not that one was needed. At first glance, the Supers Association forum didn't seem too different from a regular forum, aside from its content. Does anyone know the weakness of a swamp wyvern? Oi, seems like we have a big shot in the house. FR. If I recall correctly, wyverns are usually above level 30, right? That's a teenage wyvern, not exactly strong. It's the nonchalance of subtly calling a wyvern weak for me. Newbie cultivator here. How strong is a wyvern for us cultivators? A level 30 should be a commander rank beast for you guys. So yeah, you'll need a knight commander or mage commander to take on a wyvern. Dude, just say a rank 3 cultivator. It's not my fault, brother. Awakeners and cultivators' power systems can be confusing at times. That was the kind of content in the forum. Michael could only read in awe, unable to fully grasp most of it. Once again, the Supers Association delivered essential information right to his fingertips, not in the form of step-by-step guidance, but through an interactive platform. Since it was a forum, Michael could search for whatever information he needed or ask directly, which he did without hesitation. Though some of the posts on the homepage had intriguing titles, Michael stayed focused. Reading random posts wouldn't help him. He couldn't even understand much of what they discussed yet. Michael dove into a spree of information seeking, and the gaps in his understanding slowly began to fill. By the time he was done, it had already grown dark outside, but he hardly noticed. Reading through various posts on the forum had opened Michael's eyes wide. What shocked him most was the sheer power hidden within this world. We've always heard about cultivators and awakeners, but aside from a few basics about cultivators, like life seeds and the ranks that follow, everything else is shrouded in mystery. Information about awakeners is even more elusive. Michael felt a mix of shock, enlightenment, and excitement. It's my fault for underestimating the people of this world. In fact, it wasn't just Michael who had these misconceptions. Even the original citizens of this world felt similarly. After all, it had only been a little over 200 years since Aurora first came into contact with mana. How advanced could their civilization have become in such a short time? However, they were all wrong, very wrong. The truly powerful beings of this world were astonishingly strong. For example, Michael finally learned more about the power system of cultivators. There were 7 ranks in total, from rank 1 to 7, known respectively as Apprentice, Elite, Commander, Master, King, Emperor, and Demigod. Yes, Demigod. At first, Michael thought he had misread, but after checking 3 times, and even watching a video of a demigod effortlessly defeating a 100-meter-tall monster with a casual slap, he was left speechless. He didn't know exactly how strong that monster was, but he was certain that a mere sneeze from it would have been enough to end his life. Even if such powerful beings were rare, they should not be few. If they were, the Federation and the Supers Association would likely have kept information about them under tight wraps. The Supers Association forum truly expanded Michael's perspective, and he found himself exhilarated by what he had learned. Power, power. I must have it. If before, becoming an Awakener was mainly about improving his and his family's life, with living a fulfilling life as a secondary goal, now Michael's heart burned with a fierce desire for power. It took a while for Michael to calm down from the surge of excitement. He had also learned a lot about Awakeners, particularly regarding the mysterious Land of Origin. The Land of Origin was a mystical realm that only Awakeners could access. It was said to resemble a game world, complete with levels, quests, and more. But one should never mistake it for a game, or they would come to regret it deeply. See thenovelfire.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. What linked the Land of Origin to an Awakener was the Mark of Origin. Michael glanced down at the back of his right hand, where a flower-like tattoo lay. This hadn't been there before. Michael had never gotten a tattoo. It only appeared after his awakening, this mysterious tattoo, following him ever since. The mark would only show if he wanted it to. Name: Michael Norman. Race: human. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 1. EXP: 0/100. Strength: 1.3. Agility: 1.4. Constitution: 1.2. Intelligence: 4.5. Attribute points: 0. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class skill: Contract slot 0 halves. Gift: Mark of Origin. The Mark of Origin had 2 primary functions. First, it served as a key to connect an Awakener's consciousness with the Land of Origin. Second, it acted as a miniature spatial space. Yes, like a spatial storage ring. Michael had already checked off one of the must-haves on any transmigrator's list with this discovery. However, Michael was curious about what a gift meant, as his Mark of Origin was labeled as one. Yet, He couldn't find any information about it in the forum. This seemed implausible. Surely, all the Awakeners in the Supers Association would be interested in this topic. So, there could only be one explanation. The information was restricted. It likely meant he wasn't yet authorized to access such knowledge. Michael felt he was on the right track with his guess, especially since, right next to the profile they created for him, Level 1 member was clearly displayed in bold. This only made Michael more curious about what a gift was. If information about demigods could be accessed by a Level 1 member like him, even if it wasn't particularly in-depth, then the fact that details about gifts were hidden suggested that this subject was considered more important than even a demigod. Perhaps it held the same weight as matters concerning a god? Though the forum didn't have any direct mentions of gods, Michael couldn't help but suspect that they might exist in this world. It was only after exploring the forum that he realized just how deep the mysteries of this world ran. Fortunately, he could still investigate other information about the panel in his head, turning his attention to the next most intriguing aspect, his talent. According to what he found on the forum, talents could be seen as innate skills that could be used without the need for mana. They were akin to high-level skills, except that they were rare, even among Awakeners. There were two ways Awakeners could obtain a talent. One was through pure luck during the awakening ceremony, and the other was by seizing certain opportunities in the land of origin. It was clear that something extraordinary had landed in Michael's lap. However, he felt that his talent was a bit peculiar. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Evolution points: 1, 16 hours, 9 minutes, 23 seconds. Aside from the fact that something called evolution points would appear and accumulate every 24 hours, this talent seemed to be currently useless. Despite this, Michael was still pleased to have a talent. Even though he didn't understand its use yet, he was confident it would prove valuable in the future. From its name, Infinite Evolution, he held high expectations for what it might become. Chapter 10. Michael also read a few things about classes and races, and he had something to say to his teacher who had claimed there's no discrimination between classes. Bullshit. In reality, there wasn't any outright discrimination against classes from what Michael could see. However, unlike how his teacher had portrayed it, there was indeed a clear division between classes. There are no weak classes. Only weak Awakeners was a phrase Michael frequently encountered in the forum during his searches. But from what he had just read, it was undeniable that some classes held certain advantages over others. At least the school got one thing right: the classification of classes into combat, support, and lifestyle roles. Now, thanks to the Supers Association forum, Michael also discovered that there were actually 5 types of classes: general class, rare class, special class, hidden class, and unique class. SEO are the novel, F. IRD NUT website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. General classes are the most commonly seen classes among Awakeners. A large percentage of Awakeners possess these classes, which is why they are considered common. These classes are also easily recognizable, as they provide only 2 attribute points per level up. Rare classes are a step above general classes, offering 4 attribute points per level up. These classes can utilize magic or other special abilities. However, a class does not necessarily need to focus on magic to be categorized as rare, like the Berserker class, for example. Special classes are somewhat unique and unconventional, which makes them difficult to categorize strictly as either general or rare. For instance, the Chef class provides 3 attribute points per level up, while a Barb class might only grant 2 attribute points, despite both being special classes. The term special refers more to their unconventional nature and niche focus. These classes can be considered rarer than rare classes, but their unique nature makes them versatile in how they are grouped. Hidden classes are inheritance-type classes that very few people can have simultaneously. Similar to special classes, they are rare, but they have an added layer of exclusivity. Hidden classes cannot be naturally awakened, but can only be obtained through special means, which makes them particularly elusive. Unique classes are the rarest of all, with only one person able to possess a particular unique class at any given time. There wasn't much information about unique classes on the forum, but Michael didn't think that was actually the case. He read somewhere that the number of Awakeners in Aurora was a bit more than 70,000, and he found it hard to believe that no one had any information about unique classes. If they truly knew nothing, it wouldn't even be recognized as a legitimate class type. Michael believed it wasn't that information about unique classes didn't exist on the forum. Rather, it was that his authority level wasn't high enough to access such information. It seems authority level isn't just for show. I should try my best to raise it, Michael thought with a subtle smile on his face. Even though it felt like his head might explode from all this new information, it was as if a fascinating new world had opened up to him, and he couldn't get enough of it. These worlds are truly interesting with a lot to offer. Something else that surprised Michael was that even one's race could influence the benefits they received when leveling up. This revelation opened another world to Michael. From what he read, each level up as a human race granted 0.2 in all stats, 0.5 in intelligence, and 2 attribute points. Michael wasn't sure if this was low or not, but it seemed significant. Since they say the land of origin is like a game world, I wonder if it's possible to change races, Michael mused. Out of curiosity, he tried searching for information on the possibility in the forum, but like in the cases of gifts and unique classes, he found nothing. As before, this either meant the information didn't exist or his authority level wasn't high enough. Michael, already used to this, decided to move on. He also read about his class, the Necromancer, which, pleasantly surprising, turned out to be a rare class. Races weren't the only things that provided benefits as one leveled up, classes did too. Aside from the attribute points they provided based on their grade, certain stats would be boosted depending on the class's specialty. The Necromancer class, for instance, granted 0.1 points to Strength and Constitution, 0.3 in Agility, and 0.5 in Intelligence, along with 4 attribute points. Necromancers are basically paper defenses. A punch from a similar level warrior class could probably take out more than half my health, Michael thought immediately. He also began to understand why people in the forum kept emphasizing that power ultimately depended on the Awakener themselves. Classes, race, cultivation, resources that could raise stats, stats themselves, and attribute points. If one utilized these things wisely, even an Awakener with a Tailor class could become deadly. The more Michael read, the more excited he became about the future. He couldn't wait to enter the land of origin, but he knew he couldn't rush in without making proper preparations. Yes, preparations. As an Awakener, he was naturally bound to enter the land of origin, but according to the forum, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows there, especially for new Awakeners. In a Tips for Newbies forum post, which was even starred by the Supers Association, Michael learned that when an Awakener entered the land of origin for the first time, their initial location was random. It could be near an active volcano, a frozen wasteland, or even in a monster's nest. However, there was a balance. According to the post, it would be something a new Awakener should be able to handle theoretically, and Michael didn't like the sound of that, hence his need to prepare. Even the experienced commenters in the post emphasized the importance of preparation. Thanks to the post, Michael also understood why the Supers Association provided such generous funds. It was indeed meant for resources. In the Supers Association platform, aside from the main forum, there was also a store section. Michael saw a myriad of goods there that left him in awe. Refined Iron Dagger. Price, $230. Refined Iron Spear. Price, $285. Health Potion. Price, $500. Leather Pants. Leather Shoes. Leather Upper Body Armor. Michael searched for items recommended for newbies and picked the ones he liked. The store had 2 delivery methods, picking up at the Supers Association or opting for home delivery. Michael decisively chose the latter. If he could avoid leaving home, why should he move? Plus, compared to the total cost of the items he bought, the delivery fee was cheaper. Including the delivery fee, Michael spent a total of $4,328. Just like that, a third of the $15,000 the Supers Association had given him was gone. The Supers Association is really scummy. Michael pouted in pain as he connected his account to the Supers Association platform and watched his money disappear. Michael did not regret buying the items, though. Even though death in the land of origin wasn't real death, if he could prevent it, why shouldn't he? The penalty for dying was harsh, losing 10% of all stats permanently for each death. The dead awakener would also be unable to re-enter the land of origin for a while. Perhaps this penalty wouldn't be as severe for new awakeners, but it was a big deal for the real powerhouses. Imagine having 100 points in all stats and watching 10 permanently disappear. It was a pretty harsh punishment for the top-tier awakeners. After all, the stronger one was, the harder it was to increase a stat. It wasn't just numbers at that point. A 1-point stat increase for a level 100 awakener could very well be the equivalent of 10 points for Michael. After placing his order, the Supers Association platform confirmed that his items would be delivered before noon the next day, which Michael was quite satisfied with. It's not too late to enter the land of origin tomorrow anyway. It's even better. I'm too exhausted to do anything now. Michael was also very hungry. He had learned a lot of information, which significantly filled the gaps in his understanding. Anything else he needed to know could be searched for slowly in the future. For now, Michael just wanted to sleep and wait for the new day to arrive before entering the land of origin. He was excited, but he had his priorities straight. Michael put aside his phone and was just about to carry the plate he'd used earlier when a knock came at his door. "Come in," he said reflexively. When he saw who was on the other side, he was surprised. "Aunt." Yes, it was indeed Aunt Mia. Michael had been so engrossed in the Supers Association forum that he hadn't noticed anyone entering the house. "Seems like our new awakener has been busy," Aunt Mia teased as she made her way to Michael's bed and made herself comfortable. "Aunt Mia," Michael said, a little embarrassed by the title, but a happy smile bloomed on his face. He could see a smile on Aunt Mia's face, too, one that was threatening to widen, and hidden within, he could also see that she was proud of him. One must know that both Michaels, from Earth and Aurora, had only experienced true parental love from one person, and that was Aunt Mia. Both had become orphans at a very young age, and Aunt Mia was a mother figure to them, especially to the Michael originally from this world. Though Aunt Mia had a short stature, her blue eyes held the gaze of a mother looking at her child. Michael greeted her respectfully, and he was happy that she was happy. Before he could speak, Aunt Mia beat him to it. "Lily told me about your little adventure today." Michael silently clicked his tongue in annoyance. Perhaps he shouldn't have told Lily anything at all. Now the news he should have delivered himself had come through someone else. But, since it was all family, it didn't really matter. "The amount of money the association gave you is really big, but be careful with it, Michael," Aunt Mia said anxiously. In her eyes, Michael was still a young boy. She had no interest in his money, but she was worried about his spending habits. Though Michael's past record of handling money reassured her, this time the amount was so much larger, and she couldn't help but worry that he might waste it. "And don't mind your silly cousin. There's no need." "Aunt Mia," Michael called out, his tone serious, cutting her off before she could continue. He already knew what she wanted to say, but he didn't want to hear it. His family was his motivation, his drive. Now that he could finally provide for them, how could she refuse? Michael felt dissatisfied. "Aunt Mia, the money the association gave me, well, a big chunk of it is for my well-being, so you don't have to worry about anything." As he spoke, Michael had already pulled out his phone, ready to transfer a portion of the funds to her. "Michael," Aunt Mia exclaimed anxiously. She didn't entirely believe his words and feared he was going to inconvenience himself for her. In fact, she was right. But did Michael care? No, he didn't. This was likely a stupid decision, but for once, at least one, Michael wanted to satisfy his selfish desire. And also, if he ended up broke, he could wait for more funds to come in next month, all the while working hard in other areas. Michael wasn't afraid of hard work. Ironically, hard work was what had killed the Michael in this world. The hopeful fool had seen a rumor online that if one trained hard enough to come close to becoming a knight, the chance of awakening would be higher. The original Michael knew this was nonsense, but feeling unlucky and with many responsibilities on his shoulders, he pushed himself too hard. In the end, he died, allowing Michael from Earth to take his place. "It's okay, Aunt Mia. You don't know this, but the Supers Association is still going to give me more resources soon," Michael said, lying with a straight face. It was, of course, impossible. The association wasn't going to do more for him. They weren't his family, and even some families couldn't always provide that much. "Are you lying to me?" Aunt Mia asked, a little uncertain. "You know I'd never lie to you," Aunt Mia," he said, delivering another lie with an innocent face. This time, he felt a slight pang of guilt but didn't let it show. Aunt Mia looked conflicted, her expression reflecting her mixed feelings. Michael noticed her hesitation and knew he had to strike while the iron was hot. "Also, since becoming an awakener, I can feel my appetite slowly increasing. We'll need more food at home, Aunt Mia." Michael spoke with a feigned look of seriousness, but just in time, his stomach rumbled, adding authenticity to his words. This convinced Aunt Mia a little. What made her trust his words even more was his status as an awakener. As an awakener, he should be valued by the Federation, right? She thought. Like most adults, she knew of the Federation's admiration for awakeners, though she didn't know that while they valued awakeners, they weren't exactly looking to pamper them. Finally, Aunt Mia chose to believe Michael. "Okay," she agreed. Happy, Michael immediately transferred some money to her. "Feel free to use it as you like, Aunt Mia. And please, get a few things that Lily enjoys too," he added with confidence, like a rich man. Just then, Aunt Mia's phone buzzed, showing a bank notification of a $5,000 credit. Aunt Mia was speechless and was about to scold Michael when he spoke again. "Trust me, Aunt Mia, this money is nothing to me now. Didn't Lily mention that I'll be getting money every month?" Aunt Mia nodded reluctantly. If he was telling the truth, her little Michael could indeed afford to spend money like this. However, she decided that, while she'd use some of the money for the family's well-being, she'd save the rest until she could confirm his words. Seeing that he'd successfully convinced his aunt, Michael secretly sighed in relief as a smile appeared on his face. "You're hungry, right? I brought some cake and snacks on my way back. Want some?" Aunt Mia asked, remembering the thunder that had erupted from his stomach earlier. "Yes, I'd love some, Aunt Mia." After confirming, Aunt Mia took the plate Michael had planned to carry out earlier and left the room, returning shortly with some snacks. They shared a few more words before Aunt Mia left, and Michael's room finally fell quiet. Soon, the soft sound of his snores filled the room. Michael slept with a smile on his face that night. Today had been the best day of his life, even if it was just as stressful. Chapter 11. Chapter 11, Land of Origin. The next morning, Michael woke up feeling refreshed. Although his mind felt clearer after awakening, the mental exhaustion wasn't that easy to be shaken off. Fortunately, a good night's sleep had worked wonders. Not quite ready to get up from his bed, Michael sat on the edge, as his thoughts drifted back to the events of the previous day. "It's amazing how quickly life can change," Michael mused, a smile tugging his lips. Yesterday had been a turning point, and he couldn't have asked for a better outcome. And the best part was yet to come. "Today's the day I enter the land of origin. I wonder what I'll encounter." Excitement bubbled up as he imagined the possibilities that waited for him in the new day ahead. After shaking off the last traces of drowsiness, Michael stood and pulled open the window shades, letting the morning light flood in, brightening and invigorating the room. "It's quite bright. What time is it now?" He grabbed his phone from the desk and glanced at the screen. It was just past 8 a.m. He really had gotten a good night's sleep. Aunt Mia has probably gone to work by now, and Lily should also be at school. With that thought, Michael left his room to confirm if anyone else was still in the house. As expected, it was just him. Although the delivery from the Supers Association wasn't due until noon, there was a chance that it might arrive early, so Michael decided to freshen up and wait. And he didn't want to leave the apartment without being prepared. Besides, once he received his order, he planned to enter the land of origin immediately. He really couldn't wait any longer. Since he had some time, Michael decided to clean up the house to pass the time. "My classmates would probably never believe that even an awakener still has to clean," Michael thought, amused. Awakeners were celebrities of sorts, even though little was known about them except through a few clips of them in action. Just like celebrities back on Earth, there were some overzealous fans who probably couldn't imagine their favorite person doing something as mundane as using the toilet. While a few mischievous thoughts crossed his mind, a chuckle escaped Michael's lips as he happily cleaned up whatever he could around the house. After finishing his chores, Michael brushed his teeth, showered, and got dressed. Since the delivery still hadn't arrived, he reheated some leftover rice from the previous day and ate it while browsing the Supers Association forum on his phone. Never in either of Michael's lives had he been so invested in studying. It was understandable, though. While the information was somewhat complicated, it was fascinating. It felt like it had been pulled straight from a fantasy novel. It was worlds apart and far more immersive than the academic subjects he had to endure. Time passed quickly, and a little over 11 a.m., his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Curious, but a bit wary, Michael answered. "Is this Mr. Norman?" A voice came through. Hearing the question, Michael immediately guessed who was on the other end. "Yes, I am," Michael replied, already standing up. "Great. Mr. Norman, I'm here with your delivery. I'm currently in front of your apartment building, but I am not sure which floor you live on. Don't worry, I'll meet you downstairs. Please wait for me," Michael said, already stepping out of his apartment and locking the door behind him. Perhaps because the apartment building was old, or because the landlord was too cheap, there was no elevator. Residents had to use the stairs to reach their floors. While it was inconvenient, it was probably for the best, because if there was an elevator, the rent would have likely been higher, resulting in it not being as affordable to the many residents living in the building right now. Luckily, Michael's apartment was on the second floor, so it didn't take him long to meet the delivery man from the Supers Association. As Michael approached, he couldn't help but be momentarily taken aback by the man's appearance. The delivery man, who seemed to be in his late 30s, had an imposing physique. But what truly caught Michael's attention was the man's right hand, or rather, the mechanical limb that had replaced his right hand. In this world, advanced technology has made the loss of a limb a manageable inconvenience, enough that losing a limb isn't considered a serious issue anymore. One could easily get a mechanical replacement that functioned almost like the real thing, except for lacking a sense of touch, and, of course, being expensive. However, most people with such mechanical limbs also purchased artificial skin to cover them, which was both realistic and far cheaper than the limb itself. There were generally only two types of people who went without artificial skin covering on their mechanical limbs: those who couldn't afford it and those with a particular sense of style. Judging by the delivery man's choice of clothing that deliberately exposed his mechanical arm, he likely fell into the latter category. However, Michael couldn't deny that the man had pulled it off well. The exposed mechanical limb looked quite cool, giving him a rugged, almost heroic look. "Are you Mr. Norman?" the delivery man politely asked as he saw Michael approaching. "Yes, I am. I assume you have my order," Michael replied, also nodding in response to the delivery man's partner's greeting, who remained seated in the van. After confirming Michael's identity, the delivery man quickly began unloading Michael's order. There were quite a few packages, and Michael knew that even with the improved stats granted by his awakening, lugging everything upstairs to his apartment would be a challenge. To his relief, the delivery man with the mechanical arm offered to help, which Michael greatly appreciated. Once everyone was inside his apartment, Michael stood in the living room, staring at the pile of packages on the floor with a mix of excitement and dread. $4,000. For $1,000. Every time he muttered how much he had spent to buy them, it felt like a knife was stabbing into his heart. Yet his hands moved eagerly, tearing open the boxes. Michael hadn't splurged recklessly while placing his orders from the Supers Association store just because he had some money in his account. He had carefully followed the recommended list of essentials for first-time entrants to the land of origin, selecting only those that suited his needs. Half an hour later, Michael had opened every delivery package and placed their contents neatly in the spatial inventory of his mark of origin. As a new awakener, the spatial storage in Michael's mark wasn't particularly large, but it was more than enough for his current requirements. He didn't bother changing into the leather armor he had bought or equipping the weapons he had purchased. According to the forum, anything worn or held by the awakener wouldn't follow them into the land of origin. Only items that were stored within the mark of origin would make the journey, so everything Michael thought he needed was already stored there. Taking several deep breaths, Michael made his way into his room, feeling anticipation, excitement, and a bit of nervousness. According to the forum, connecting one's consciousness with the land of origin meant leaving it behind in the real world, so his body had to be placed in a suitable position before leaving. And so, Michael decided that lying down on his bed was the safest option. "Let's do this." He concentrated on the mark on his hand, trying to connect his consciousness with the land of origin. Since it was his first time, it wasn't easy, but thankfully, the land of origin was an innate part of every awakener. It didn't take long for him to finally succeed. Michael's right hand, which was raised in the real world, slowly fell as his body began to softly snore. Chapter 12. Chapter 12 Reality different from expectation. New chosen detected. Chosen identity confirmed. You have gained a new skill. Detect. Michael had spent hours reading about the land of origin, endlessly speculating where he might find himself upon arrival. Would it be in the middle of a dense forest? A sprawling plain? Or perhaps dangerously close to a monster nest? The possibilities were as vast as his imagination, and Michael had hoped that as long as it wasn't anywhere near monsters, he'd be fine. When he opened his eyes, however, he wasn't greeted by serene landscapes or open skies. Instead, he found himself in a dark, confined room. The black brick walls were slick with moss. If not for the holes in the roof that allowed a few rays of sunlight to stream in, the room would have been pitch black. A foul stench filled the air, assaulting his senses and making him gag in disgust. What is this smell? Rotting garbage? Or worse? Shaking his head, he pushed his discomfort aside. No, focus. That's not important right now. Where on earth am I? If he hadn't registered with the Supers Association and gained access to information about the land of origin, Michael might have panicked. However, though Michael knew each Awakener's initial spawn locations were random, he wasn't exactly thrilled about his current surroundings. The problem wasn't the location itself, but rather the disgusting smell. His current location wasn't the worst per se. At least there were no monsters or erupting volcanoes nearby. But he knew it was better to proceed with caution until he learned more about his surroundings. This wasn't just his own hunch. Experienced Awakeners had emphasized caution multiple times in the Tips for New Awakeners forum post. First step, observe your surroundings. Michael turned his attention to inspect the wall beside him. Wall. A wall made of old, weathered bricks. Figures. Michael thought sarcastically as he read the description. Having expected it, he wasn't surprised by its sudden appearance. The information was courtesy of a new skill he had gained. Actually, one that every Awakener was granted upon entering the land of origin for the first time. Detect. Much like the skills in games, Detect allowed the user to gather information about specific objects they focused on. It was an essential skill, especially for both new and experienced Awakeners alike. However, Detect came with its limitations. For instance, it couldn't reveal information about living beings that were significantly stronger than the user. If the target was more than 20 levels above the user, Detect simply wouldn't work. On the other hand, the skill revealed detailed information when the user was significantly stronger than the target. Detect could also improve over time, providing more details as the user's knowledge grew. Shifting his focus away from the room's wall, Michael took a moment to observe his own body in this world. As expected, nothing from Aurora had followed him, not even his clothes. Thankfully, he wasn't naked. He was dressed in simple attire that commoners wore in the medieval times on Earth. Aside from the clothing, there was nothing else of note on him. Now that he had a basic understanding of his surroundings, Michael decided it was time to explore. However, before leaving the room, he decided to arm himself, just in case. There was no sign of monsters outside, but it was better to be safe than sorry. He had read countless stories on the forum about the unfortunate fates of new Awakeners and had no intention of becoming another cautionary tale on his first day. The first item Michael retrieved from his storage space was the leather armor he had purchased from the association. While better options existed, they were either too expensive or impractical for someone at this level. Suppressing the urge to gag from the foul smell around him, Michael quickly but quietly donned his leather armor. Time to arm myself. Michael had purchased 3 weapons from the association, 2 melee weapons and 1 firearm. The gun had surprised him. It was easy to obtain without any complications. Apparently, his status as an Awakener was all the license he needed. Given the gun's effectiveness in the land of origin, he decided to bring one along as his primary weapon. Compared to the spear and dagger he'd purchased, he felt that a firearm would be much more reliable. Though he'd never held a gun in either of his lives, let alone fired one, it offered a few clear advantages over melee weapons. For one, it allowed him to attack from a distance, and even if he missed, he could fire multiple shots quickly. Of course, guns also had their drawbacks. For instance, the noise could attract monsters or other unwelcome attention. Michael had considered this risk and even read about it on the forum, and that was why he had also bought a silencer for his gun. Guns are one of the best tools to have in the early stages, but they quickly become obsolete as one grows stronger. Like the experienced awakeners in the forum said, personal strength is still the most important thing here. After loading his gun and disengaging the safety, Michael took a deep breath, relaxing his tense shoulders. Then he stepped out of the dark room. Even if his first impression of the land of origin wasn't what he had envisioned it to be, Michael's excitement about this new world remained undiminished. Chapter 13. Chapter 13 First Kill. Besides civilizations like Aurora, which are connected to the land of origin through awakeners, there exist native civilizations as well. This building, however, seems to be a remnant of the past, now abandoned and forgotten, Michael observed. After walking out of the dark room where he had first appeared, he found himself in a wide corridor faintly illuminated by the light that filtered through the holes in the distant ceiling. If the ceiling hadn't been so far out of reach, he might have already tried to break through rather than wander aimlessly as he was now. But thanks to the ventilation provided by these ceiling holes, Michael's movements did not cause an echo. As he ventured deeper into the corridor, Michael identified the source of the foul stench that filled the air. Slimes. These magical creatures looked like harmless, gelatinous blobs, but were far from it. They secreted acid with a stench just as terrible as their appearance. Slimes moved by crawling and could hop to attack, making them both unpredictable and dangerous, at least to the average human. The foul smell he'd encountered came from a slime trail left outside the room he'd started in, though he couldn't be sure if the same slime was nearby. But after a while of exploring this vast, seemingly empty and endless building, he finally encountered one. Acid Slime LV4. Rank, Common. A harmless-looking slime that shoots acid. Devious enough, he thought grimly. Slimes happened to be one of the creatures Michael had read about in a forum post titled Common Monsters in the Land of Origin, while idly waiting for his delivery. Interestingly, the post's author was the same person behind Tips for New Awakeners, a Level 5 member of the Supers Association. While Michael wasn't sure about the significance of a Level 5 member, he thought it sounded impressive. In the post Common Monsters in the Land of Origin, creatures like slimes and goblins were described with their pictures attached, so even before using Detect on the acid slime, Michael had already recognized what it was. What he hadn't expected was for something like the acid slime to exist. It looked vastly different compared to the cute, blue variant he'd seen in the post. However, since the Awakener had mentioned that slime came in numerous variants, he wasn't entirely caught off guard in the end. A 2-star common rank monster. Guess that says a lot about its freakish nature. Michael wasn't sure if it was the acid slime's slightly grotesque appearance, the terrible stench, or its ability to shoot acid that bothered him most. In the Land of Origin, monsters were ranked by rarity and potential into 7 ranks from low to high. Common, rare, extraordinary, epic, legendary, mythical, and demigod. Each rank was further divided into 3 mini-grades called stars, like 1-star common, 2-star common, 1-star rare, 2-star rare, and so on. Both monsters and items followed this ranking system. For items, the stars indicated efficiency and quality, while for monsters, they represented their growth potential. Every star in a monster's rank allowed it to rise to 7 levels, so a 2-star common rank acid slime, like the one in front of Michael, had the potential to reach level 14. A rank 1, level 4 slime that shoots acid. Sure enough, this slime is too freakish. Whatever happened to being just cute, huh? Though Michael's thoughts seemed scattered, he was carefully weighing his options, whether to confront the acid slime or retreat. Despite being over 3 levels above him, slimes were considered some of the weakest monsters, making them relatively manageable and easy to kill with proper preparations. Michael reminded himself of his primary goal, shared by all Awakeners entering the Land of Origin, to grow stronger. And the quickest way to do that was by leveling up. As a necromancer, his future strength would eventually depend on summoning the undead. But for that, he would have to kill something. Without them, he'd be nothing more than a fake necromancer at the end of the day. Leveling up also allowed for customized stat allocation, which meant it could technically offer Michael the flexibility to build himself like a warrior if he so chose. However, Ignoring his class's natural strengths would only make him mediocre, and there were no reset buttons for awakeners who carelessly squandered their potential. Too bad slimes don't leave a body behind after their death, or I could have finally used my class skills to revive something. Of course, he wasn't entirely serious. Even if the slime had left a body, he wouldn't be eager to contract such a smelly creature unless he was truly desperate. In some ways, starting with a slime wasn't the worst outcome. Any other monster might have posed a significant challenge, but slimes were known for their slow movement and relatively easy to deal with. Still, Michael knew that he couldn't let his guard down. A leather armor alone wouldn't be enough to protect him if he got hit by an acid shot. After a brief moment of hesitation, Michael finally decided to risk it. He would turn this acid slime into experience points, or end up as its food. Let's do this. Suppressing the urge to take a deep breath to steady his nerves, Michael darted out from his hiding spot and began firing at the football-sized green block monster that was about 10 meters away. Tui, bang, tui, bang, tui, bang. He fired 3 shots and missed every one of them. The acid slime quivered, finally noticing him, turning to look at him, vibrating in a way that seemed almost angry, or so Michael imagined. He hadn't expected his aim to be this poor, even at a distance of 10 meters. Sure, the slime's small size made it a tricky target, but missing all 3 of his shots? Michael wanted to blame the recoil, but his enhanced awakener body made that excuse weak. My aim is truly terrible, he thought, frowning. He readied himself to shoot again, but before he could, the slime launched a jet of acid straight at him. Shit! Michael dodged hurriedly by diving to the side, barely avoiding the brunt of the attack, but a slightly large drop of acid managed to land on his unarmored arm. Ah! He stifled a scream as a searing pain radiated from the burn. At that moment, he realized he'd heavily underestimated the acid slime. But there was no time to dwell on the pain as the slime had launched another acid shot, which Michael dodged successfully this time. But his confidence was wavering with each passing moment. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he struggled to ignore the searing pain in his arm. His left hand had now turned useless, and he could only aim with his right. The second attack had finally angered him. Accuracy be damned. He started shooting wildly in the slime's direction. Tui, bang, tui, bang, tui, tui, tui. While most of the shots missed, his burst of frustration had somewhat begun to inflict some damage on the slime, even if it was only a little. Soon, all 30 bullets in Michael's gun were exhausted. As he fled from the acid slime that had now turned slightly smaller but was still hopping after him, Michael followed the marks he'd etched on the walls with his dagger to avoid getting lost in the vast, abandoned building. He fumbled to reload, but the pain in his left arm made it difficult, causing him to drop several clips in panic and one-handed awkwardness. The worst part was that the slime's hopping speed, though sluggish, was only slightly slower than his own, keeping him within its attack range. Though his leather armor protected his back and legs, Michael could still feel the fumes of the acid closing in. After several tries, Michael finally managed to reload the gun and resumed a frantic shooting spree at the slime. His strategy devolved into desperate cycles of retreating, reloading, and shooting wildly until a lucky shot pierced the core inside the slime. The creature shuddered and dissolved into a bubbling mess, marking its death. You killed a common LV4 acid slime. You've gained 45 experience points. You killed a monster 3 levels higher than your own, earning a 4x experience multiplier. You've gained 180 experience points. Level up. You have leveled up to level 2. You have learned the skill, Basic Shot. Michael dropped to his knees, breathing heavily. On his very first day in the Land of Origin, Michael had almost been taken down by one of the weakest monsters that existed, a slime. Chapter 14. Chapter 14 New Skill. You've leveled up to level 2 Human. You've gained 0.2 stat points in Strength, Agility, and Constitution. You've gained 0.5 stat points in Intelligence. You have gained 2 attribute points. You've leveled up to level 2 Necromancer Apprentice. You've gained 0.1 stat points in Strength and Constitution, 0.3 stat points in Agility, and 0.5 stat points in Intelligence. You have gained 4 attribute points. Michael could barely register the flood of notifications. It felt like he was about to die, His whole body burned as if it were engulfed in flames. A section of his left arm looked mutilated, the sight horrifying enough to make his stomach churn. Suppressing the urge to scream, Michael retrieved one of the health potions he'd bought from the Supers Association store. He hadn't expected that he would need it so soon, less than 2 hours after stepping into the Land of Origin for the first time. Despite the constant warnings about not treating the Land of Origin like a game, part of him still had. The thought had fueled his excitement, filling him with the dreams of leveling up like the protagonist of a cheap novel, rising to the peak of this world and beyond. Perhaps it was his lingering teenage optimism that kept him hopeful, or maybe he was subconsciously slipping into the role of an 18-year-old, despite being an adult back on Earth. With trembling hands, Michael poured half the potion over his injured arm and gulped down the rest. Gradually, the pain began to fade. Michael watched in awe as the potion worked like magic, regenerating new flesh over his wounds. A scar remained, likely due to the potion's low grade, but he didn't care. As long as the terrible pain was gone, he could deal with the rest later. I almost died, Michael thought grimly. Death in the Land of Origin wasn't permanent, but he'd undeniably come close, especially since it was against one of the weakest monsters in the realm. I'm pathetic, too naive, too inexperienced, too reckless. If I just kept my distance from that acid slime, I wouldn't be in this mess. What Michael didn't realize was that while his performance was far from perfect, it would have impressed most veteran awakeners. Not only had he succeeded in killing a monster on his first encounter, but he had also taken down an opponent that was several levels higher than himself. Though it was just a slime, it was still superior to him. Michael also misunderstood the slime's reputation. While slimes were among the weakest monsters in the Land of Origin, that label applied only from a certain perspective. The writer of the post calling slimes weak or easy prey was someone who was already a powerful being qualified to look down on slimes. For many, especially new awakeners like him, slimes were no joke, and underestimating one had been Michael's first mistake. Both the Michael from Earth and the one from Aurora shared a common flaw, a tendency to be unrelenting with themselves. Growing up as an orphan forced Michael to mature quickly and shoulder responsibilities, leaving him with little room for patience for his own mistakes. This same trait made it difficult for him to feel little sense of accomplishment despite defeating the slime he subconsciously disdained as weak, which many first-timers would fail to do. After sitting in silence for a brief moment, Michael's messy emotions finally calmed, and he began to focus on other things he had to do now. While he began thinking of his next action, Mitchie's gaze drifted to the ugly scar on his left arm and thought with uncertainty. This scar won't follow me to the real world, right? There was something remarkable about the bodies of awakeners in the Land of Origin and their real bodies in the real world. The former was a perfect replica of the real-world body. Both bodies could be considered perfect clones that were in sync with their counterparts. This replication was so precise that even pain felt as vivid and intense as it did in reality. Recalling his recent encounter with the acid slime and the thought of its acid attack sent a shiver down Michael's spine. God, I hope I don't develop PTSD over slimes. That would be too pathetic. After examining the scar a bit longer, Michael concluded that it likely wouldn't follow him back to reality. This body's primary function was to synchronize any strength gained here with his real one. However, it seemed he'd have to bear the scar here until he died in the Land of Origin. According to one of the posts on the Supers Association forum, an awakener's body in the Land of Origin functioned much like a real one. It was independent from the original and therefore required food and other activities for sustenance. It wasn't just a digital avatar like in a game. This was also why death here was only counted if the entire body or major organs were destroyed. Losing a limb wouldn't kill him, but it would leave him crippled in this world. And if he wanted to regain a fully functional body, his current body would need to be destroyed so that a new one could reconstruct the next time his consciousness re-entered the Land of Origin. To put it simply, one could reconstruct a body they disliked by killing themselves. However, aside from the fact that many were not sick enough to consider this, even the seasoned awakeners would rather remain crippled than end their own lives. This was because death in this world, while not permanent, still resulted in a severe consequence. a 10% permanent reduction in all stats. It was a penalty not many could afford to lose. Thus, despite death not being truly final here, most Awakeners took their lives seriously and avoided risking themselves unnecessarily. By now, Michael had recovered from his life and death battle with the acid slime and could finally focus on something he'd been putting off. I leveled up. Though his performance against the acid slime left much to be desired, Michael wasn't someone to turn down the experience points. He had a problem with the slime, not with its generous experience reward. Status: Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level: 2, 1 carat. EXP: 80/250. Strength: 1.6, 0.3 carat. Agility: 1.9, 0.5 carat. Constitution: 1.4, 0.3 carat. Intelligence: 5.5, 1.0 carat. Attribute points: 6. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, New. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 0/4. Gift: Mark of Origin. Compared to how it looked after he first awakened, Michael's status screen now appeared vastly different. The first thing that caught his eye wasn't the change in his level or stats, but the skills section. In addition to the 2 class skills he has started with since awakening, entering the Land of Origin had granted him 2 more, one of which stood out. Michael was already aware of the function of his first 3 skills. Undead Summoning, a primary skill that allowed him to summon and dismiss undead at will. Undead Revival, his true core skill that enabled him to create undead summons in the first place. Detect, a basic scouting skill, useful for gathering information. Now, however, there was a new addition. Basic Shot, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 0.6%. Fires a single, accurate shot at the target with standard damage. Seems like something that belongs to the Archer class, Michael thought. Michael was, in fact, not wrong. Basic Shot was more than just any ordinary skill for the Archer class. It was one of their core skills, much like how Undead Revival was for him. But how? And why? Could Michael learn that was meant for the Archer class skill? Class skills were called class skills, not because they were exclusive to one class, but because certain classes could maximize their potential. For example, while Undead Revival was a skill other classes could technically learn, non-necromancers couldn't make full use of it. Even if another Awakener learned both Undead Revival and Undead Summoning, the number of undead summons they could control would be severely limited, unlike necromancers, like Michael, who unlocked additional summon slots with each level up, making these skills uniquely powerful in their hands. Interestingly, contract slots also served as a means to gauge talent for classes like necromancers and beast tamers. Just because 2 individuals awakened the same class didn't mean they were on equal footing, especially when it came to contract slots. For instance, Michael had 2 contract slots at the start and would continue to gain 2 more with each level up. However, there were rare individuals who would start with 5 starting slots, meaning that while Michael would have 20 slots at level 10, they would have 50. This was a key factor in grading the classes that relied on contracts. Returning to class skills. While class skills weren't exclusive, they were optimized for specific classes. When non-necromancers learned Undead Revival, their mastery began at Basic Mastery, and raising their proficiency would be challenging. Necromancers like Michael, on the other hand, started at Intermediate Mastery for skills like Undead Revival or any necromancer-centric ability, giving them a significant edge. This principle applied to other class systems as well. Though Michael had successfully learned Basic Shot, his mastery began at Basic Mastery, whereas archers would automatically start at Intermediate Mastery for this skill, regardless of whether they received it at Awakening or learned it later. This skill should make up for my terrible shooting a bit, Michael thought, pleased. Just because his recent experience with the acid smile had been painful, he didn't have any intention of avoiding more monsters. Though he didn't enjoy pain, who would? He wasn't someone who would run away. Shifting his focus away from his new skill, Michael began to examine the changes brought about by his recent level up. Chapter 15. Chapter 15: Killing More Slimes. Name: Michael Norman. Level: 2, 1 carat. EXP: 80/250. Strength: 1.6, 0.3 carat. Agility, 1.9, 0.5 carat. Constitution, 1.4, 0.3 carat. Intelligence, 5.5, 1.0 carat. Attribute points, 6. Skills, Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, New. Talent, Infinite Evolution. Class Skill, Contract Slot 0/4. Gift, Mark of Origin. My stats have increased, was the first thing Michael noticed. He hadn't felt anything earlier, which made sense, given the pain had been all-consuming. Now, after seeing the digital representation of his stat boost, Michael paid attention to his body and finally noticed it. He stood up and tested a few movements to gauge the extent his stats had risen. So this is what it means to level up, he thought, a sense of awe washing over him. Since his awakening, this was only the second time he had felt his body was truly different. He could only imagine how much more pronounced these changes would become as he leveled up. Now he was only level 2, but what about when he reached levels like 50? By then, even his less relevant stats for his class, like strength and constitution, might reach superhuman levels. Among his stats, Michael noticed that intelligence had increased the most. Unfortunately, it was currently useless, as he still had no way to utilize mana. The intelligence stat didn't actually make one smarter. It simply represented an awakener's total mana and their ability to learn skills quickly, like spells. Thanks to his human race and necromancer class, each providing 0.5 stat points in intelligence, Michael now had nearly 6 times the average intelligence of a typical human. The stat system for awakeners factored in their race to determine their strengths accordingly. Even before his awakening, Michael had known that races like elves existed in the land of origin, and some of these elves weren't native to the land of origin, but hailed from other realms like Aurora, where awakeners also resided. For example, an elf with a strength stat of 1 would have it scaled to match their natural physique. So, if elves were inherently stronger than humans, a single point increase in their strength stat might equate to what would be 2 points for humans. This same system principle was applied to class systems, where certain classes had inherent advantages over others. However, all these differences were meaningless to him now, given that he was still lost in the middle of nowhere. The next most significant boost went to his agility stat, which surprised him. Why would a mage-type class like Necromancer prioritize agility? It was a well-known fact that classes would naturally distribute the attribute points upon leveling up, which in turn would make the class stronger. Agility affects one's movement speed, reaction time, dodging ability, and attack speed. Michael wondered what a mage class like Necromancer would benefit from agility, but he made a note to research it later. After intelligence and agility, strength and constitution saw the smallest enhancements. Strength influenced physical power, melee damage, carrying capacity, and general physical feats. Constitution impacted health, endurance, resistance to both physical and elemental damage, and environmental factors. Michael knew these stats would have been even lower without the boosts from leveling up as a human. If his stats depended solely on his Necromancer class, his mana pool might have been vast, but then even a lower-level physical class could probably have taken him down with a single punch. Yet despite these seemingly small increases, Michael estimated that his overall performance had improved by at least 30%. And this is only from one level up. I need more experience. The surge in power was addicting. Despite the ordeal with the slime, Michael had no intention of shying away. Ever since watching that video of a demigod cultivator in action, he'd vowed to reach a similar level of strength. A single, bad run-in with a slime wasn't going to change that. However, the experience had taught him to be more cautious. If he were to face slimes again, he'd either have to use his brains to outsmart them or suppress them with sheer power. Michael didn't consider himself dumb, but he wouldn't exactly call himself brilliant either. After all, an intelligent person wouldn't have just attacked a level 4 monster, regardless of its species, with the desperation of an experience-hungry dog, and he'd been just that. But if he wanted to use power to suppress any slimes he encountered, Michael's gaze drifted to his attribute points displayed and used on the panel. Maybe, just maybe, they could help him. Attribute points, 6. Chapter 16. Chapter 16, Increasing Strength. Michael wouldn't claim to know much about his new reality just because he had spent a few hours browsing the Supers Association forum. But thanks to those hours of studying, he could say he now understood much more about Awakeners than he did before. Aside from a few other things, there was one thing that all Awakeners wanted, regardless of race. Attribute points. Each point represented the entire power of an average individual from their respective race. A literal, instantaneous boost. And right now, Michael had 6 of these precious points he could use to instantly strengthen himself. Which stat would maximize these points and help me most right now? Michael wondered. At this moment, he needed an immediate edge, something to boost his survivability and strength, and aside from external items, these 6 attribute points were his only hope. Michael examined his stats carefully, considering which of the 4 would best support him in his current situation. Strength, 1.6. Agility, 1.9. Constitution, 1.4. Intelligence, 5.5. Attribute points, 6. Michael's initial location could be described as odd. At first glance, it didn't seem particularly dangerous, but it couldn't be called safe either. It might be a stretch to label it dangerous because of a single slime, but that slime, a genuine monster, also made this place questionable. What if there were more monsters? And what if they weren't slimes? Michael didn't particularly like slimes, but he admitted that they were probably the best kind of monster he could currently handle on his own. If the acid slime had a stat system of its own, Michael imagined that it would likely have 90% of its stats to intelligence, 8% to agility, and the remaining 2% split between strength and constitution, just enough to stay alive. This was just a rough estimation, but it was obvious that, despite being an acid slime, its constitution was minimal. Even with gun and bullet technology refined over 200 years, he shouldn't have been able to kill the slime by destroying its core embedded within its acidic body. And now that Michael had time to think, did he realize just how incredibly lucky he'd been? If he had encountered any other monster, say, a wolf with 90% of its stats and agility, he'd probably be back home right now, cooking something for his cousin. Monsters were supernatural beings, which meant even a wolf's speed would be terrifying. Normal wolves were already faster than an average human, so a monster wolf would have been a nightmare to escape. A slime, in contrast, was manageable. With a long-range weapon, it could be defeated without risking close contact. But without one, getting close enough to fight and kill an acid slime was almost suicidal. Just one wrong step could result in excruciating pain, a worse deterrent than even facing the consequences of death. I really hope there's no other kind of monster in this building than slimes, Michael thought. As for hoping for no monsters at all, that wasn't his wish. He was greedy for the experience points. Okay, it's decided. I'll choose agility and constitution. For a necromancer, these stat choices might seem wasteful, but Michael had no choice. Right now, he was a fake necromancer without a single undead summon or spell to cast. Although intelligence was his most important stat, it felt useless at the moment. Ironically, investing in it felt more like a waste at the moment. As for why he chose agility and constitution, the reasoning behind his choice was simple. The latter would boost his health and endurance, helping him survive longer, and the former would help him in running from anything he couldn't defeat, or at least stay out of their reach. Between the two, he planned to put more points into agility. I'm really a disgrace to necromancers, he muttered to himself. After a moment of thought, Michael stopped hesitating and began allocating his points to increase his stats. First, he placed 2 points into the Constitution. Constitution, 3.4. After increasing his Constitution by 2 points, Michael immediately felt different. A warm sensation spread through his body, leaving behind a subtle sense of increased health. The changes were hard to pinpoint, but the most noticeable effect was on his mutilated left arm. With his constitution now 3 times that of an average human, the scar seemed to fade slightly, not completely disappearing, but looking older, as though it had been healing for years. This kind of showed an important detail. Future scars wouldn't vanish entirely either, and increasing constitution would only make them appear more healed. Even though I haven't ascended to rank 1 yet, with 3 times the constitution of an average human, my lifespan should already be pretty long, right? Michael wondered. Though he was uncertain, he felt that he was on the right track. Awakeners had incredibly long lifespans. Rank 1 Awakeners could live up to 200 years, so what about those at higher ranks? Beyond offering great power, the Land of Origin presented another alluring gift: immortality. Michael suspected that for many, immortality was the real prize. Power was just a desirable bonus. After taking a moment to adjust to his enhanced constitution, Michael allocated points to his agility stat. Agility, for point 9. Compared to constitution, the effects of increasing agility were immediate and dramatic. When Michael tried to move his hands, the newfound flexibility and speed caught him off guard, making him stumble, and he almost flipped himself over. Amazing. Though in an awkward position, his heart was filled with excitement. The boost to his agility felt like breaking free from the invisible chains that had been weighing him down. 4 times the average human speed. I'm practically a mini superhuman in the eyes of ordinary people now. And this is just level 2. Once I advance to first rank, the stat increase will be even more insane. Michael was thrilled with his growth, and he was eager to get even stronger. Now, he didn't fear acid slimes hurting him. He feared the possibility of not finding any to fight. Before exploring the abandoned building, though, he took a few minutes to adapt to his newfound agility. After testing his speed and movements, he was left stunned. The average speed of a human is about 100 meters in 10 seconds. I just tried running, and I'm hitting around 80 meters per second. And I think it's only this fast because I still need to get better control over my body. This is just the strength of an unranked awakener at level 2? No wonder only a handful of cultivators dared challenge the arrogant awakeners on the forums. But more than anything else, Michael was overjoyed. He felt lucky to have awakened. Like cultivators, before truly stepping into the supernatural path, awakeners below rank 1 were also referred to as apprentices, a fact that was even reflected on their status panels. But considering his current strength, even a new rank 1 knight might not necessarily be as strong as he was now, right? Are cultivators really that weak? No, I can't think like that. Michael quickly scolded himself, sensing a flicker of arrogance. That wasn't a good path, lest he become conceited. The waters of this world run deep, and I'm not qualified to look down on anything yet. After calming himself, Michael also recognized that his distribution of attribute points as a necromancer was clearly off. Far from ideal. It was better to excel in one thing than to be mediocre in everything. But the issue was that he didn't have much of a choice in this. Right now, strength mattered the most for leveling up, and more importantly, for his survival. As for necromancy, since he'd need to kill a monster first to create an undead summon, he could only hope that, if he did encounter one, it wouldn't be too strong. There's nothing I can do about it now, and no point in worrying. I'll leave it to fate. First, let's see if the slime dropped anything valuable. Excited, Michael made his way over to the acid slime's corpse. As for his last attribute point, he decided to keep it in reserve for emergencies. Chapter 17. Chapter 17 Spirit Crystal. Just like loot in games, the Land of Origin had its own version. However, unlike in games, you couldn't simply touch a monster's corpse, shout loot, and watch materials spill out. While it was possible for a monster corpse to occasionally burst out some loot, more often than not, the corpse itself was the loot, and to get what you wanted, you had to manually dismantle it. That said, there was one common type of loot that usually appeared from slain monsters. Unranked Spirit Crystal. I actually got a Spirit Crystal on my first kill. So lucky. Michael eagerly picked up the transparent crystal. Spirit Crystals, said to be superior to Mana Crystals, which themselves were the advanced version of Mana Stones, were highly valuable. They were materials that could only be found in abundance in the Land of Origin. Mana Stones were cultivation resources that both cultivators and awakeners could use for their growth. A single Mana Stone could increase cultivation speed by up to 3 times. This meant that using a Mana Stone for 1 month of cultivation was equivalent to 3 months of normal cultivation. The value of a Mana Stone was indisputable. Then there was the advanced version, the Mana Crystal, which could boost cultivation speed by up to 5 times. 5 times the cultivation speed meant that 1 month of cultivation with the help of a Mana Crystal was equivalent to 5 months of normal cultivation. Given how valuable Mana Crystals were, one could just imagine the value of Spirit Crystals, which were placed above them. The two could hardly be compared. A spirit crystal could boost someone's cultivation speed by a staggering 10 times. 10 times meant that 1 month of cultivation with a spirit crystal was nearly equivalent to an entire year of normal cultivation. However, something as valuable as a spirit crystal was unsurprisingly rare and in short supply. But what really excited Michael about the appearance of this spirit crystal wasn't because of its cultivation benefits. Like most awakeners, Michael wasn't too much focused on the strength brought by cultivation. The real reason he was thrilled about the spirit crystal was its monetary value. For someone like Michael, red-eyed with poverty, the money-making potential of being an awakener was a major motivator. One way he planned to make a profit was by selling loot to the Supers Association. As a common loot dropping from roughly every 3 to 4 kills, though sometimes even less out of every 10 kills, Michael had paid close attention after learning of its existence. In the Supers Association store, a mana stone was priced at $1,000, while a mana crystal could fetch $5,000 due to its rarity and ease of absorption. Outside the association, these prices climbed even higher. But a spirit crystal? Thanks to its rarity and the pure, easily absorbable mana it contained, it was valued at an astounding $20,000. $20,000. Though the selling price would differ from the store price, Michael estimated he could still sell it for at least $15,000. It was clear why he was so thrilled with this find. To think I'd make my monthly allowance from the Supers Association on my first outing. Truly, being an awakener is a fast track to riches. Michael was pleased, but he quickly grew a bit conflicted upon remembering another potential use for the spirit crystal. Aside from their renowned ability to boost cultivation speed, mana stones, mana crystals, and spirit crystals could also help replenish depleted mana, though this practice was often considered wasteful. However, certain energies, like soul energy, couldn't be replenished by mana stones or crystals. Michael had come across some posts on the Supers Association forum that mentioned souls, but the topic felt distant and complex. Michael figured that such topics would be covered in an Awakener Academy, perhaps something he would learn if he ever managed to get into one. Though Michael didn't think much on the subject of souls, he knew soul energy was directly tied to something he possessed, a talent. Talents were considered an advanced form of spells, but were more powerful, as most skills couldn't match their capabilities due to their sheer potential. Unlike skills, talents didn't require mana. Instead, they relied on soul energy, a resource no awakener could ever have enough of, making talents a sort of pseudo-trump card. And since soul energy wasn't the same as mana, it couldn't be restored by mana stones or crystals either. If an awakener didn't want to wait for long to slowly recover their soul energy on its own, they could rely on spirit crystal to replenish it. This unique property made spirit crystals especially valuable to not just awakeners or talent holders, but to any supernatural who relied on soul energy. Michael had a talent, which was why he hesitated, feeling conflicted about whether he should be using the spirit crystal or not, even though he'd never actually used his talent. Talents were powerful abilities, and though Michael tried not to be bothered by his current inability to access his own, he couldn't shake the sense of discomfort. Would I be able to finally use my talent if I were to absorb this spirit crystal? Michael was uncertain. This hesitation made him take a while to come to a decision. Michael, look at the bigger picture. Money is good, but strength is better. If I can get one spirit crystal, I can certainly get another. If there's even a chance of using my talent, it's better to use this spirit crystal. With more strength, I'll be able to hunt more monsters and collect even more spirit crystals. Gritting his teeth, Michael finally made his choice. He would absorb the spirit crystal. Author's note. Apprentice cultivators face significant limitations. They can only passively absorb mana through breathing exercises or meditation techniques, with the rate of absorption depending on their innate talents. Unlike official cultivators, they are unable to actively draw mana from external resources like mana stones until they advance to official cultivator status. This limitation makes resources that accelerate cultivation for apprentice cultivators, with little to no side effects, highly valuable. Unfortunately, mana stones, mana crystals, and spirit crystals are excluded from this category, as apprentice cultivators lack the ability to access the mana contained within them. Also, Even after advancing to official cultivator status, apprentice cultivators are still referred to as apprentices, though now in a more formal sense. Interestingly, those in the pre-advancement stage were originally called trainees, but this term has largely fallen out of use over time. Chapter 18. Chapter 18 Suspicions. After absorbing the spirit crystal, Michael didn't feel any immediate changes. It wasn't until he checked his status to see his talent that he was finally able to see one. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Evolution points: 3. The evolution points increased? Michael's eyebrows raised slightly in surprise. There was still just over an hour left until a full day passed since his awakening yesterday. This meant the daily evolution points would soon arrive, bringing his total to 4. Though I guess it's a good thing that the evolution points are increasing, but why haven't I felt any changes yet? Do these points need to accumulate to a certain level before I can use my talent? Michael speculated. Michael also couldn't shake another suspicion about how his talent worked. Maybe my talent is linked to my class for activation. From what I read on the forum, that's a pretty common issue. Perhaps I need an undead summon before I can actually use my talent. Michael sighed as he thought about it, frustration evident in his expression. He wanted an undead summon too. But unless he encountered another easy monster like the slime in this building, which he didn't think was likely, there wasn't much he could do. For now, he had no choice but to go with the flow. Maybe the Supers Association forum has a solution. I'll make sure to research it after I'm done here. Even though he had used the precious spirit crystal and still couldn't use his talent, Michael tried not to feel disappointed about it. At least he had gained something in return, even if it wasn't usable yet. Shifting his focus away from his talent, Michael turned his attention to the other loot left behind by Acid Slime's corpse. It was the slime's core. The core had been scattered on the ground, likely damaged from the shot that killed it. I'm not sure if this is worth anything, but I'll take it just in case. Not willing to throw away anything that was potentially valuable, Michael gathered the acid slime's core, which was about the size of a ping-pong ball, and placed it into his mark of origin. Afterwards, he retraced his steps back to where he had first encountered the slime, following the trail it had left behind. His goal was to recover the bullet casings he had dropped when trying to distance himself from the slime's acid shots. Unfortunately, some of the bullets had been destroyed by the acid during the chase, but a few managed to remain intact, and Michael wasn't about to let them go to waste. Just because the casings were damaged didn't mean that the bullets inside were damaged as well. Every bullet was worth money, and he wasn't about to be generous and leave them to nature. After recovering most of the casings he had dropped, Michael returned to scanning his surroundings. At first, I wasn't sure, but now, after so many turns, I think this building might be a dormitory or at least a place where a large number of people used to live. The large rooms and the overall structure of the building fit the description. Michael was still unsure of it since he had only explored a small part of the building and couldn't make an accurate guess yet. Let's keep exploring. Maybe there are more monsters in this building. Hopefully, there'll be slimes, preferably nothing too freakish. It wasn't that Michael was afraid of other types of monsters, but his experience told him that slimes were the only creatures he could handle in his current state. Only rabbits could come close other than that. Had he been closer to civilization, he might have even received a quest to hunt such creatures. However, his starting point was far from any village or town to expect any easy battles, unlike some new awakeners. As for why he felt confident about only being able to handle slimes now was because of his combat prowess. There was a reason as to why guns became useless to awakeners after a while. The forum didn't explain it clearly, only hinting that monster skin grew thicker or that they developed skills that gave them the ability to turn projectiles like bullets ineffective. However, after increasing some of his stats, particularly his constitution, Michael started to piece things together and understand a little. Strength, 1.6. Agility, 4.9. Constitution, 3.4. Intelligence, 5.5. Attribute points, 1. With nearly 4 times the constitution of an average human, Michael's enhanced constitution affected his health, endurance, and resistance to both physical and elemental damage, as well as environmental factors. He suspected that even a bullet shot at him might struggle to cause him serious harm. He might not even bleed thanks to the increased toughness of his skin, just as a lighter wouldn't harm an average person with normal durability. With his constitution now enhanced 3 times that of a typical human, Michael had reason to believe that he'd be much harder to kill with ordinary weapons. If this was true for him, then what about monsters? Though attribute points gave Awakeners a substantial, almost unfair advantage, just like a cheat, making them stronger than most monsters at the same level, there were still higher-level monsters that possessed significant powers and demanded caution. Some of these monsters could have a constitution that could match or even be greater than his, depending on their species, rank, and number of stars. Compared to those stronger monsters, creatures with relatively weak bodies, like acid slimes, were indeed the safer opponents for a newbie like him. Michael didn't dwell on these thoughts for long. Shortly after moving through the large building, which he suspected had once been a residential area, he encountered his second monster. However, the sight in front of him left him conflicted. Should I be happy or not? Acid Slime LV, 7. Rank, Common. A harmless-looking slime that shoots acid. Chapter 19. Chapter 19, Clearing the Space, 1. Just as Michael had hoped, he encountered another monster. It was another slime, just as he wished. However, this slime had a higher level than him. While Awakeners shouldn't be judged solely by their level, thanks to attribute points, there's a reason the saying, fight according to your level, exists. Although a level 7 acid slime didn't necessarily mean it would be much harder to kill due to a slime's naturally weak constitution, its acid would likely be more potent than the previous one. However, with my current constitution and speed, could I actually take on this slime head-on? Michael wondered. Monsters didn't have attribute points like Awakeners, so any increase they got as they leveled up was purely based on their race. If Michael relied solely on the stat increases his human race naturally provided, 0.2 in all stats and 0.5 in intelligence per level, he'd only gain 1.8 in strength, agility, and constitution and 4.5 in intelligence by level 10. He'd be stronger than other humans, but nowhere near as powerful as he was now with his attribute points. This was why attribute points felt like cheats. With attribute points, even a level 7 monster shouldn't be too tough for Michael if he planned well. For the acid slime, avoiding its acid shots would lower the danger significantly. Of course, Michael only considered this. Until his gun proved ineffective, he preferred long-range combat with monsters. It wasn't that he lacked close combat skills. By the time students left high school in the real world, most had basic combat training. Due to the combat-oriented nature of Awakener and Cultivator professions they could potentially have in the future. Though he wasn't the top in his class, Michael had learned some close combat skills. But knowing how to fight didn't mean he could automatically apply it well in a real encounter. Michael stared at the acid slime, about 20 meters away and slowly crawling further. If it had been farther, his detect skill wouldn't have worked, as unranked Awakeners could only use it within such a limited range. I wonder if basic shot will be effective at this distance, Michael thought, uncertain. Unlike detect, which was arguably unique, other skills, even class skills, had clear limitations and mastery levels. Detect had its own limitations, but notably, it didn't have a mastery level. Unlike other skills, which started from basic mastery or class skills from intermediate mastery, detect had no mastery rank. One unique feature was that, like a talent, it didn't use mana, yet unlike talents, it also didn't require soul energy. The only valuable information he found in his research was that detect could be considered a passive skill, a rare type that required no mana to activate and function constantly. Active skills, in contrast, needed to be manually activated using energy. Yet, despite this classification, detect still didn't quite feel like a typical passive skill. Michael was intrigued by the nature of the detect skill, but when he searched the forums, he found only basic information, with no mention of its unique properties. His first thought was that this was due to his authority level in the Supers Association, which was only level 1. If detect required a higher authority to learn more about, it confirmed its unique nature. Perhaps, he thought, it might even have something to do with the uniqueness of the land of origin itself, rather than just the skill's effects. Other skills, however, were generally more straightforward once one became familiar with them. Most skills didn't mean immediate effect upon activation. Just because an Awakener had the Fireball skill, for instance, didn't mean a fireball would instantly appear upon activation. Instead, activating a skill provided the caster with knowledge and an instinctual feel for its workings, making it easier to use. The higher the skill's mastery, the deeper the knowledge and ease of use. Take Basic Shot, the skill Michael acquired. Activating it wouldn't immediately fire a bullet. Instead, it would instinctively guide him on how to hold the gun, aim, and shoot, an improvement over his earlier, more random attempts. As his mastery improves, the more the skill would feel like second nature to him. Chapter 20. Chapter 20, Clearing the Space. 2. As thoughts raced through Michael's mind, he raised his gun and aimed at the distant acid slime. Quietly, he activated his skill. Basic Shot. Immediately, a flood of instinctive awareness followed. He realized that his grip was off, his aim was unsteady, and his posture was misaligned. Each flaw became glaringly obvious to him. Step by step, guided by the skill's influence, Michael made corrections, refining his stance, tightening his grip, and recalibrating his aim, all while his focus remained locked on the unaware slime moving in the distance. Despite the skill's assistance, it took him nearly 15 seconds to make all these slight adjustments. He could still sense that there was more room for improvement, a stark reminder of his low mastery of Basic Shot. With higher mastery, aiming and shooting would become second nature. He'd become faster, more precise, and won't need to think as much. The skill's miraculous effect left Michael speechless. For the first time, handling a gun felt natural. Though the skill hints that I could improve even further, this is already leagues beyond my earlier fumbling. All I need to do is raise my skill's proficiency and mastery. No wonder the Federation prioritizes Awakeners. We really are like cheats, instant power-ups, mastering skills in moments that should usually take years to perfect. If I were an archer instead of a necromancer, wouldn't I already be a sharpshooter? How can ordinary people compete with this? Sure, both are powerful, but the teachers were really wrong to say Awakeners and Cultivators were equal. It's not surprising, though, since the world barely understands these two professions in the first place. Is the Federation deliberately hiding something, or is there something bigger at play? Despite the whirlwind of thoughts, Michael's focus never wavered from the slime. As soon as his aim was steadily locked onto the monster, he pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! A soft crack of the shot echoed faintly through the long hall, muffled by the presence of a silencer. Pooey. Unlike his first encounter with an acid slime, where he had missed almost every shot, this time the very first bullet Michael shot struck the monster. Although it didn't kill the slime, the bullet had left a hole dangerously close to its core. Basic Shot is so powerful. Michael was awed as he praised in his mind and began to retreat. Though close, the slime was far from defeated, and now it was aware of him. No eyes, no ears, yet it can sense me, truly a freak of nature, Michael mused, revealing his dislike for slimes. But it's slow. Even though monsters didn't have attribute points, Michael had expected the level 7 acid slime to be stronger. However, aside from increased intensity and range of its acid attacks, which was likely what had improved with its level, its speed was barely faster than the last one. If it's this slow, there's nothing to fear. But that didn't mean Michael would be reckless. He had learned to respect the unknown. Despite his increasing confidence, Michael knew little about the full extent of their abilities. However, seeing the slime's slow pace, Michael thought that he could potentially finish it off with the refined spear he had bought from the Supers Association store. But after pondering over it for a moment, he decided against it. For now, he chose to keep his distance and take advantage of the situation. As long as the slime couldn't reach him, he could still land a few shots from a safe distance with his gun. Using this strategy, he could continue leveling up until his bullets ran out or his gun became ineffective against high-level monsters. Only after the situation turned to such that his gun won't be effective would he consider close combat. After circling around and following his path back to the room he'd first arrived in, while avoiding unexplored areas to prevent running into more monsters, Michael finally managed to bring down the acid slime with a series of precise shots. You killed a common LV7 acid slime. You've gained 103 experience points. You killed a monster 5 levels higher than your own, earning a 6x experience multiplier. You've gained 618 experience points. Level up. You have leveled up to level 3. Level up. You have leveled up to level 4. You've leveled up to level 4 human. You've gained 0.4 stat points in strength, agility, and constitution. You've gained 1.0 stat points in intelligence. You have gained 4 attribute points. You've leveled up to level 4 necromancer apprentice. You've gained 0.2 stat points in strength and constitution, 0.6 stat points in agility, and 1.0 stat points in intelligence. You have gained 8 attribute points.